Do you wish you had a mouse making hands up? Do you wish you had a mouse when you made hands up? It would have made it a lot easier.
I don't think it would. By then I got so used to using a keyboard. You know, more or less, without having to think about it, which key was in, which track came. So I don't think a mouse would have helped.
I could open up generally to the other two artists that we got here as well, because when that question was asked, I saw everyone else go, no, we don't like using a mouse or anything here. So I think same question to you, Paul. I mean, what would you prefer and why?
I tried doing Teletext with a mouse, and because of the size of the pixels, it tends to sort of overcompensate and overshoot. So I find it harder to be precise. You know, it's whereas it's fine for using Photoshop or something like that. I don't know about you, Steve. Have you ever used a mouse in Teletext or tried to?
I have tried to, and it's just unusable. It has to be the keyboard, just the keyboard.
Yeah, it's that, the double press.
Yeah.
Many of you have ever done Teletext graphics. It becomes second nature. You can do it as fast as using a mouse.
A lot faster.
Faster. If you RSR, I've had that a few times.
Thank you. So, with all your various Teletext journeys that all three of the panellists have been on, the inspirations that you've had, I understand that Ian came from a print media background, so he was probably the first to have all these ideas, whereas these guys, would you consider yourself like a second generation Teletext artist?
My kind of speciality was large pixels, which I guess is all around back then. I started off, I learned Teletext was a lab of basics. They had a Teletext page, but they also had their own in-house systems. It was actually slightly higher resolution than Teletext, but it was basically worked in the same way. In fact, Steve got there as well. Steve and I went to school together, which is how Steve came to work at Labrooks and Teletext. We knew each other. But after Labrooks, I then went to work at Wembley Stadium, which on the scoreboard, doing graphics with their scoreboard. And there the pixels were literally light bulbs, to the point that if you had a dead pixel on the scoreboard, I had to climb up to the top of the stadium. There you go, there we are. And each of those pixels was a light bulb, and part of my job was to go and replace the light bulbs. We had one out, we had to walk across a gangplank, 150 feet above the stadium, reach outside and just do that. It was, so that was sort of my thing. When I met with Graham at Teletext, I had a portfolio with my Labrooks and Wembley Stadium art in it. But it was chunky pixels, whatever the medium was sort of my thing.
Okay, Steve, I'd just like to follow on from that then. When you came into the pixel art scene, or the sixel art scene, as we say, so there's only the 6, with like standard computer graphics, it's like an 8x8, and you wouldn't believe how much freedom that gives you. When you've only got 6, it's a complete nightmare when you're drawing circles, so that could give you PTSD. But so when Steve came into art, then were you already aware of Paul's artwork?
Yeah, I was. I can't follow Paul's stuff all the time. I was a huge fan of his cartoons, his illustrations.
Well, it was mutual. We were in the same art club. We were best friends at school. We went on holiday together. We kind of drew pictures all the time.
Yeah, we got thrown out of art almost. The art teacher hated us.
Yes.
Wouldn't follow the rules. But it was amazing when Paul gave me the opportunity to follow him to Labrooks when he left Labrooks. And Labrooks you could animate the pages in Labrooks, so
Yeah, that was the big difference with lab books in-house and also with Wembley, was animation. I mean, you know, it was actually, I think with lab books, what was it, 16 frames of animation we had? Something like that, so there was a lot of repetition to get anything lasting longer than kind of about 10 seconds. But
then you could repeat it and it just
you could repeat it. So that was, and likewise with Wembley, again, it was limited numbers of frames you could have because there was so little memory stored. But Steve was, you know, the best artist I knew, which is why I kind of kept recommending him to people.
Yeah, I took the jobs quite quickly when I was offered them. But definitely, obviously Ian was the OG and his stuff, there's nothing quite like that. To start with no one to reference, and produce, for example, that animation you just saw, I've never seen anything like that. I'm completely blown away by it. I would never even, I've been asked before, can I do animations? And they said, no. I would never even try it. But to see that amazing animation we just saw, it just blew me away completely.
Yeah, I mean, for me, Ian's art was the reason, really, that I kind of had a fascination with this sort of low resolution. You know, you were a huge influence on me. 40 was, you know, that was why I ended up creating Turn of the World, was because I'd loved watching 40 and reading 40 when I was a kid. So, you know, and I wanted to create my own version. But Ian's art for me was always, I mean, I'm quite, as my wife will attest, I'm quite maximalist. I think you're quite similar to me in that way. Was the thing that always impressed me with Ian's art was how minimalist it is and how he did a lot with very few lines. You know, I was always scared by whole graphics. Any of you familiar with that, and backgrounds and things. So I kind of ended up doing the whole black lines thing, which Steve did as well.
Because I can't do
art was so clean. And I was a bit intimidated by him. He's a legend, you know.
I mean, I was the same with whole graphics. I still can't use them.
Yeah.
I still can't do it. So it's just black borders. Put the codes in the black space.
For a little bit of context for people who hold graphic, it's like the offside rule. It's really hard to explain, but when you do it, you understand that you just shouldn't need to use it. It allows you to change something very quickly in a page without needing a gap, because you'll notice that in Teletext there's a lot of gaps. And in these gaps there's instructions, and the instructions are telling the next pixel what to do, you see. Now with a whole graphic, it's like a cheat code, because you can trick it into just sort of going, right, we'll do the next thing but without that instruction in, so you can change a colour or you can move a graphic. But the payoff is that it has to be exactly the same shape attribute, so you can't really sort of like do much with it, and it just looks as if it's been through a mincer when you've done. In fact, if I can get Mr. Pixelblip just to stand up and show his T-shirt, that will show you a real effective use of whole graphics. Thank you very much. Lovely, cheers. So I just want to see, are there anybody else got any questions at all? I can open this out to the field at all. Okay, all right. Well, the same will come. Don't worry, because what I'd like to do is ask you, Ian. Do you have a particular favourite piece of artwork that you've done in your career?
I wouldn't say a particular favourite. I mean, I suppose there was some I was quite pleased with. There was, I don't know if we can show it.
Oh, yes.
In the beginning of CFAX, we were discovering what you could do with graphics. We used to put our experimental designs on the back page when nobody would see them anyway. But we could try things out that way. One of the things I tried was to emulate simply that, just black and white, and then the artist had managed to create an impression of multiple without using any shading or gradations at all. It was just black and white. And I thought that could translate very well in teletext terms, just sheer contrast. And that was what I came up with. So that was, in a way, a favourite because I discovered one way of using the limited teletext graphics that we had. Then there are others, various illustrations for trails for TV programs. I think that there was one for a series called Built in Britain. That was using simple rules of perspective to give you a feeling of depth instead of just putting in a flat screen on the same plane. The view that you were looking into the frame. And I used to play around with that sort of thing.
Well, thank you, Ian. I really enjoyed the perspective one there as well, and it goes to show that less is always more on this medium. The more that you twiddle with it, the worse it tends to look. So when you get something like that, and also with the clear wood carving, it's very good contrast. There's no in between. It's either there or it isn't. And I think the use of what you're not using on a teletext screen is just as powerful as what you are as well, which you'll find in a lot of these artworks. Paul, do you have a particular favourite? I mean, you did a lot of pin-ups for the digitizer thing. I like the Mitchell brothers. That was always a favourite of mine.
Turn of the Worm was where I got to play around with graphics, and that was where I think I learned. I always considered myself more a teletext cartoonist, whereas Ian was a teletext artist. And Turn of the Worm was that sort of writ large. And it was doing that, find techniques of how to kind of make perspective work. I would, things in the far distance, if I was drawing a cave, the back of the cave would be, I believe, black. Then kind of the cave would kind of go a bit nearer, would be the blue, the dark blue. Backgrounds I often did as blue. But it was weird, you were sort of trying to play almost psychologically the perspective of the audience, I think, in some respects. Like we had kind of default rules in that it became that, if you all know Bamba Boozer, that was, yellow was a skin tone, even though, I don't know why it's yellow and not white, but that became the teletext sort of, Caucasian skin tone. So there you go, there's one. There you go, there he is, there's Bamba. So in terms of, there were a lot of Turn of the Worm ones. I think I did a Turn of the Worm where he went into the future, time travel. He had a time machine that was shaped like an ape for some reason. I remember he went to some post-apocalyptic future, and it was a graphic of a ruined city that I did, that I always remember being quite proud of. Yeah.
And Steve Borsenberger has done thousands of images now, and I think it would be really unfair to ask him what his favourite bit of artwork is. What do you think? Yeah, I think. What's your favourite bit of artwork, Steve?
Recently, I think I did the What We Do in the Shadows cast. And I think they worked out really well because they're very different colours and shading and light effects. I think they worked really well. but I think I'm kind of happy with everything I post up, but there are ones I post up that I'm not happy with. So usually the ones people request, 'cause I'm very bad at doing things that people want rather than things that I want to do. So if I get asked to do something, that's when I struggle. But yeah, so I think I'm happier with more than
Well, it's a fair comment, and I think you've probably all noticed already how the three styles in the same medium differ. And there's quite a few people now that are being inspired by these three gentlemen that will now come in and look at their own art form in a perspective like that. And that's the most powerful thing about Teletext. It's got the most restrictive rules. It's probably the most difficult thing to actually get an idea on, but you can see there's like Hopper there. Everyone knows that's Hopper without, without needing to know what the colour of the drink is or whatever that they're holding at the bar. And that's just the incredible thing about it. And it's become its own teletext medium now. It's even judged in art categories all around the world in countries where they never even had teletext in the first place. I mean, there's a teletext art competition in Argentina. So it's actually got up there with a lot of art modes as well. So it's we've got a lot to be grateful for with these three gentlemen up here at the moment. So if you were, I think I'd like to ask all three of you in turn really that if Teletext was still going today as a service, what extra feature would you want in there? But you still had to keep it blocky. So what would you add? I think I'll put that to Paul first.
It weirds me out how it's become so. Had such a life after what we did, because it's become that people are using teletext as a medium in itself. Whereas for me, when I worked there, it was a limitation. So even though work within the confines of that limitation, I always yearned for what Photoshop, what became Photoshop. Like I said, Graham sent me on a Photoshop course, and it was like, what? This is what I wanted to be doing. I can do art that doesn't look like that anymore. But I think as time has gone on, I've sort of so appreciated how. People have just embraced that. So that was what I always wanted. I just wanted to be able to do art that had higher resolution. If you kind of limited me in terms of sort of keeping it blocky, I don't know, because teletext is teletext, and if you change it too dramatically, we had something you may be aware there was a level 2. There's a level 3 as well, Graham, is that?
It was a level 5.
Level 5 it went up to. Oh, okay, yeah. Well, there were, it wasn't just, what we had. There were talks of sort of bringing in these sort of which had more colours, and I definitely did at least the trial Turn of the Worm strip. I remember doing one, I think, that was, we were drawing a graphic of Turn of the Worm in an Egyptian pyramid. The statues were gold and. It looked gold, but it didn't look like teletext anymore. It wasn't as satisfying. It still had the resolution. I think there was something you could do, some shapes so that you could cut off corners and they were almost
there are 5 levels of teletext. That's level 1.
Right.
And I think the one that we really wanted to play around with was level 2.5,
yes,
which is where you can round the corners. It was much higher resolution, but it ain't that.
Yeah.
And I think that has a very special place in the hearts of a lot of people.
Yeah.
I think the idea that photo teletext was going to come eventually was never going to happen, because the decoders were going to be incredibly expensive. And it meant that all those people who had gone out and bought level 1 teletext sets were going to have to throw them away and get something more expensive.
And it ceases to be teletext, which has become this thing that's become.
That's the point. It's not teletext, and the skills that you three guys have, I think, have made a niche for themselves with all those people who used teletext over the years, and you made it a very personal medium. you know, okay, it was born with, by giving people news, sport, business, weather, whatever, but the kind of cartoons and the animations that Ian produced are just what makes it so special, in my view. I'm a bit biased, admit it.
Well, yes, yeah. I mean, I think we all, you know, I think now we've all got ourselves, you know, that nostalgia for it and that fondness for it. But yeah, it's like the, you know, the photo teletext to come in. It would just be the internet. Is anyone gonna be nostalgic for the internet in 30 years' time? No, this has become, you know, because of what it was, is why it's beloved. Sorry, Peter.
Yeah, I agree with that very much. I think higher resolution would be great, but I just wonder whether artwork in a higher resolution would be as good. Could end up looking a bit amateurish, whereas with limited resolution, you've always got that kind of excuse, you know. It's amazing what you can do with such a tool. So yeah, I never really looked for anything further from specification. That mind you, I've never had the chance to play with
We've got a question from the audience there? I'll take a question from you and I'll take a question from you, sir.
My name's Robert. I'm very interested in teletext. From the beginning. My question is: did anybody ever try to do anaglyphic 3D television, teletext? You put the specs on. I've still got a VHS copy of the famous, was it on ITV? I can't remember. Related to the 3D television, and you got a free pair of specs. And I took it up with a 3D decoder thing that you plug into an analog source, like a VHS machine, and it converts it to the colours you put the specs on. So 3D teletext art would be a good thing to try.
Well, there is the whole red on blue thing. It isn't that, you know, where you've got the two different glasses, but there is a weird optical illusion effect where graphically, if you have red superimposed over blue graphics, the red kind of jumps, it does a weird thing to your eyes, but it is a kind of subtle 3D effect you can play around with.
I can actually add to that because I was trying to experiment with 3D teletext just like purely by getting a lighter blue and the red, and if you can get them just far enough apart, you can, on a white background with the glasses on, it does leap out at you, but it's a hell of a... You can only do a couple of shapes. I did one of a space rocket once, but I ended up telling everybody that it's a space rocket. So I guess that didn't work out too well. But there was one thing that I was actually considering, because I was going to ask Steve a slightly different question on that. You know, how would you enhance teletext in a way and keep it blocky? And I think going to 16:9 televisions, if we were able to use the extra pixels either side, we could use some of the examples of Steve's work where he has used more than one screen, and it gave it a lot of definition. So what we'll do, we'll bring up an image now and show you what teletext would have looked like today on a 16:9 TV. Okay, so there you go. You can see there he's actually used 4 screens. Well, it's more than 4 screens, isn't it, Steve? It's only 2 screens, there you go. So it's amazing that you can get on 2 lots of teletext at once. So you know, had the plug not been pulled, we might be getting far more information on one screen. More holidays to buy, everybody. So, yeah, okay. And there was another audience member that wanted to ask a question. I believe it's Graham.
If you remember, Paul, over in the corner there used to be a camera that we would put images below it, and that camera was called a digitizer. And it was about 6 feet away from you, Zach, so maybe that was the influence. It seemed at the time there were only sort of two types of artists, those that would start off with the camera and then tidy it up, and then people like yourselves that is all handcrafted. Do you ever use any sort of digitizer camera? Have you ever gone back to the cheating approach to this?
Well, I mean, I ended up, because we had, in the kids section, remember the kids would send in artwork. And the idea was we digitise the artwork, put it out, the kids would have their art on there. I found it easier to just copy it again by hand, because the digitizer would have so much, it would have so much kind of corruption and, stray pixels. It's just easy. I'll just copy it. So I don't know. What was the question again? I've got. That was it. Yeah. I mean, I did when I worked at Wembley. We had one there, and again, it was the same situation. All I ever used to do, because there were long days at Wembley where there was nothing going on, I used to digitise my face and put it on the screen and see my face on the Wembley scoreboard. It was the same situation. It was, the scanning and the digitising kind of technology was so basic back then that, sometimes it was just easier to do it again.
Yeah, I used the digitizer once, I think, and then it's easier just to do it by hand, just quicker. I think I've used the tracing function once or twice where you can import an image, but again, it's just easier just to block it out and then chop away the pixels until you get what you want. Just easy.
Did you use any easy tricks at all, Ian? Or was it just all keyboard for you when you were doing the images?
Yeah, I think it was virtually all keyboard. We did have a digitizer CMAC, but I think we made very limited use of it because of its inaccuracies. It was always quicker to do it with the keyboard.
Okay, yeah, right, we've got a few hands flying up, which is excellent, because it shows you haven't listened to me too much. So I'll hand you over. There's a gentleman just in the back here. If you can just give your name and then ask away.
Hello. Oh. Yeah, I've got a loud voice, I'll hold it a bit away. My name's Dan, Sound Division on the Discord server. So while we're on this topic, so sort of later on in Teletext there was a lot of sponsorship and advertisement pages. So when you dealt with the advertising firms, did they provide you like a photograph that you would then have to digitise, or was it just left up to yourself just to draw it, and then were they upset because they were like, it's not detailed enough, and that's about it?
I did a lot of my work in the marketing department and the advertising team, and there was lots. I can't ever remember anybody ever asking to do something a second time or change it. But there was a lot of holiday logos, companies, and all that sort of thing. A bit of 3DO, there's all sorts of various things, but we just pretty much left to it, and no one ever really came back. Apart from you made a pricing mistake in the holidays, which I yourself.
I never did kind of marketing or advertising graphics. That was Steve's department.
So I can't even remember if it was like this for things, but one thing with a very well-known brand, which is easy to do.
Yeah.
Yes, I could imagine the advertisers. I think you mentioned in a previous conversation we had that provided you moved one pixel on a palm tree, they were all right.
Yeah, everybody wanted their own. Palm tree and a cruise liner in the background and an airplane. Okay, well I've got 300. No, it's got to be this one for me. just redo it. Yeah, they were just constantly just redoing the same woman on the beach with a cruise liner in the background, and then 400 different prices on the same thing. Yeah, it was a challenge. It was great.
That's it. That's it. So another question. Yes, there you go.
Hello, Tim. It's not actually a question, really. It's a sort of a query. If any of the panel were aware that Ralph Steadman did teletext images. I'm not sure that they ever actually got published, and of course he wouldn't have let us keep them anyways because he famously does. But we were a media Prestel startup, and we had him come in. I had to show him how to do the technology, obviously, because nobody else knew what it was. And he did his famous Maggie images and things like this. It would be about 1981. But I don't imagine anywhere you can find any copies of it.
That'd be amazing if we could find that somewhere.
I can't even imagine how that would work because his art style is so, those big sweeping kind of lines. It's brilliantly messy. So
yes, and I don't think he was particularly delighted with the results. So that's why I'm saying maybe it never even got published.
Yeah.
But
I think that's where if you did it with a mouse it would work.
yeah.
Yeah, that would have the same effect, I think.
Yeah, I always thought that the Margaret Thatcher one was Noel Edmonds. I don't know. Yeah, that's it. It's who you see first, and that's who will remain in the mind. And I think that's really good. Do we have any more questions? Oh, we do. I'm just going to go ahead. There you go, sir.
Hi. Obviously you have a limited colour palette. Was there a particular colour that you often wished you used?
Orange.
Orange always comes up.
Sorry, the question what we have like what colour? I mean, I think that would have been great. It would help enhance three-dimensional effect. Using what the art world calls aerial perspective. You have a tonal recession, creates distance. So all colours could have helped that kind of effect. But we didn't have it.
Thank you for that. Anybody else? Oh, yes. There you go.
In more recent years, have any of you ever done any teletext art for any of the teletext services that are currently still running outside the UK?
I did, every year, Artex have an animator, an artist, it's like the only time all year they have a month where they put on teletext art. And they are often asked different artists. I think it was 2018, 2020. I did a whole load, and I think some of these ones on here we've got on the sheet before that. So I did a different piece of art every day for them. And they put it on the system. I know Dan has done it as well. So yeah, there are still countries, I think Finland are putting some on.
Yeah, YLEtext run an advent calendar every year, where they ask like teletext artists to send things in. And Dan Farriman runs that, who's at our Wigan office today. And he always worries he doesn't get to Christmas Day with the amount of artwork that he's asking for. He got to the 6th of January last year, so it's catching on really well. And Matti Ramu of YLEtext in Finland, he's in a international art sort of syndicate in a way, so a lot of the artwork from remaining teletext services from British artists, American artists, and real global thing now. Actually, that still get used, and it gets seen by real unsuspecting people in other parts of the world. So yeah, it's still very much a thing. Yeah. Have you been asked to do anything, Paul, because of this teletext resurgence? I mean, I don't know if anyone noticed the really well done McDonald's advert. It was, I really liked it. I think they should stick to making burgers personally, because, or actually just ask somebody who can get on Alistair Cree's ZX text editor and just do it properly and follow the rules. Anyway, so this was off my soapbox there. So yeah, Paul, have you been asked?
I might have done bits and bobs. I can't remember. I mean, since all this kind of exploded and teletext became a thing again, you know, albeit in a hobbyist way, I'm pretty sure I have, but not, you know, kind of in a big official capacity, but a part of sort of our competitions and things. I think I've done some. I mean, it's weird now, even though I haven't done it as a job for 20 odd years, I haven't forgotten how to do it. I mean, the Edit TF, you know, the teletext editor was online, you know, when that, you know, the second I learned about that, I was straight on it, and it took, you know, okay, a couple of minutes, and then it was like, that was it. It was as quick as it always was. So I'd love to do more. I've done bits and bobs. Someone wrote a new Turn of the Worm story. Who was that? Was that Dan? And I ended up doing a kind of final page for it.
I think there was a Mistress, was it, from Canada?
Oh yes, I don't know, yeah, maybe. I can't remember now, it was a couple of years ago. But, you know, and that actually, when I did the new Turn of the Worm, I thought, oh, I'd love to do some more of this. Because I really enjoyed doing it.
Just want to ask you mentioned Turn of the Worm. Obviously, there was another service that you did do as well for the After Hours. Was that Turn of the Screw?
Turn of the Screw, yeah, not written by me. I mean, Graham could probably tell you a bit more about the origins of that. I just did the artwork, but that was, didn't last long, did it?
Yeah.
Kind of wait to see.
Oh, right, okay. What was the idea behind Turn of the Screw then, Graham?
Well, I think, looking back at it, it was probably an adult version of Turn of the Worm. That's what it was. I mean, there were so many ideas that we had to give the service more of a visual personality. And I mean, very early on, I always wanted Mr. Men, if you remember that. And Roger Hargreaves, the creator of the Mr. Men books, he had died and his daughter came in. And the company wanted thousands and thousands.
I did some mock-ups.
Yeah. And I came over to you and said, could you come up with a cartoon which looks like Mr. Men? And I think that's what prompted Turn of the Worm. But yeah, the whole graphic side of it, we needed this thing to come to life, and there was a great pressure to make this a mass consumer thing, and that, which we'll deal with later. But the graphics really lifted it. But yeah, I can talk briefly about a little bit more about Midnight Blue, as it used to be called, and then it became After Hours, and the demise of that later.
There you go. There's stay tuned for more on that as well. That's it. So, but yeah, I think with all the services and everything that these guys have worked on, and it's and now with people now looking back and going, oh yeah, 8-bit teletext, blah blah blah, and they're bringing it all back. It's become a bit of a zeitgeist and a real go-to. So I hope that, you know, if they do carry on wanting to reflect it in the media, that they do actually go to some of the people that just happen to be pretty good at it. So I think what we'll do, if that's okay with everyone now, we'll wrap the panel up and thank our guests very much for their time. First of all, I'd like to thank Paul Rhodes de Biffo, so a round of applause for Paul. Followed by Steve Horsley over there on the right. And I hope we've saved all our energy for that man in the middle, Mr. Ian Irving. Thank you very much, it's been an absolute pleasure, and let's not wait 50 years for the next one. Okay, I'm not sure on the running order, but if everyone wants to run, take various comfort breaks, enjoy everything. The source of the heating for today is actually displaying some of Paul's later work. So this was the work that he did when he found that Edit TF he was talking about. And he thought, do you know what, I'll put some comic ideas down there. And there's some really good one there. I recommend the Tea Prancer. So yeah, go over there and have a look at that. So I'm not sure what time we're all getting back, but we will be back at some point. I know at 2 o'clock it's going to be the Teletext50 Club. So if we can get back for then, refreshments available outside. Let's all hit the dance floor for the fighting.
Hi, Dan. I'm John Vaness. I'm the guy who brought up the team. I don't know.
I'm learning the difference between the level 2.5 and the level 5. I never knew the difference between what is 1.5 and
From the same source, but I picked up from well, I've been choosing DC recovery but I do think it's very just me, so they care what you do with it. No, I know, just try and recover anything. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I don't want to back it. You don't want to take it? No. That's good. Because I usually then just shift them off onto someone else. Yeah, do it. That's what I was wondering, to other people do, there must be people who like old adverts. Some people like continuity, not so much funny continuity, but
I'm not sure. Yeah, let's see how long it's done with
that's far too clean.
Yeah, because there was 60 briny. Because it was like live from 10 o'clock.
Let me ask differently, what time do you?
Oh yeah, in fact, I took it about 5
Honestly, they were all just, that was pretty much Jim and Teletext.
Which I have lifted.
That was it. The sexy Brian Enoch. That was hilarious.
Type page numbers on this. It's fine.
I don't think Steve, this is my name. Occasionally at work, what I've done is I've run it before meetings with the news I suggest people to turn up. Turn up to meetings is longer task. Some people
He said, you went in Webpacks 2 up. It took you 2 years to get Webpacks 1.
No, it was just one more then up the boy. You kind of have to like talk to your representative. I was like, yeah, like,
This was my. This is basically.
I feel like featuring doesn't make sense unless
it's the boards he's got to work with. Give him independence in terms of scale. In other words, he's able to put the same tech on a smaller board.
This is based on my design.
You have to get the same piece. Right. Just it plugs into a cross. That's my inserted design. You can see that
I'm not sure what it is.
Video in text.
And then I'm also off-mic service.
I need to wear a black band because my telly guy, the sort of 2011 telly, it lasted a decade. No, 12 years. But the thing is, it had minimal
charity shop is a high street.
Yeah. I mean, I've just second-hand one. Well, I've got just it's only 13 inches. I'm set for that.
Okay, I don't know anybody's name, sorry, so...
You say beat, you're beat, right? Oh, there's
just stops. On break. I don't think it likes the southern heat, you see, because it's very much an old set, so it's, because this is the first one that had like electronic tuning. It's really obvious why most of these didn't have electronic tuning there. Most of them had like a door.
That's the one feature of releasing it to the timetable. That's the job, is to put it up the
It's really hard to do like partitions.
just telling you about your questions.
Yeah, that's no, they get them. They try over in China, but they so they make. Originally, I just got bored, but they recently started to do like the bits on something else. So that's even better.
You did with the colours down.
The bits from China.
Yeah, just the only bits don't go
That's all.
to two ships. All the rest of it's pretty much.
So if you're getting them manufactured in China, how do you
There you go. Enjoy.
Let's see if someone's from
These ones up here, isn't it?
I noticed there is some high density there, but also some other things.
Sometimes
I can see the problem.
Right.
that box is the same one. DVB-T and a
Rattle down.
Oh,
So that's it. Now you get what's on them. You get on with this drive. Yeah, I found it's not quite like the bind to put the disk nerve stop links to up. And I've ruined about 2 disk drives now with all this.
I presume these are very similar to the old Philips chips.
yeah, I mean, it's the same, pretty much the same process.
And they even have a Teletext.
Yeah, it's all the same. Just a newer chip.
But the magazine, ceases to be US crime, so it's all falling apart.
Funny thing is, you get 10-bit DACs for sensible money, the ADCs.
Yeah, I don't know if you're aware of the because there's WHD so like rodent games from
yeah.
the unjustified means. And in immediately you have fairly well-known adult game for the Amiga on there. And I mean, probably suggested a song and we made a song about it. It's quite really tune in the week.
Yeah.
It's quite.
I got an optical hat in my bag.
Yeah.
And
off of it.
Oh yeah.
There's more than... But when you've been through all of that, on page 101, there's a...
Go in the box.
That's what I don't know, because he sent me, Dan sent me stuff last minute to upload last night. This is the best one for looking at.
That's the one Can we put those Yeah, that's alright. This is
stress after all this breakfast. Release all that stress now. It's all here and there. That's as good as it's going to be.
Great. What we'll do now, we'll come in here if it works. Great. That's a good time. Brilliant. What do you book today, or is it stay here? Once you get back up there, one of those
one brain as well. Oh yeah, it's just a tuner.
It's your competition.
It was the chorus.
This is web facts, this is your competition.
Nah,
TV.
I know exactly what it is.
Oh, yeah.
It's because it's See the oldest ones, well, the second one.
The thing is, these pieces, they just have more like
This one, well,
you're just the fall guy carrying the cam at the end.
Yeah, this is all this work.
I think they only had four slots that were
Change the channel. This is an OSD. Something's gone funny
Yeah,
there.
yeah, that's the.
You're right, I think at the minute, no problem. Hello mate, how you doing? Are we doing a show with you? Great. So we're going to have, what are we going to have in the background, do you think? Is it that one? Great, okay, perfect. Nice. We know what technology is like.
That's it. If you sort of stand up over that one,
Are you saying you'll be able to see our TV or not? Do you think it's clear there, isn't it? We should probably do it on now.
Yeah, unless you think exactly at 50 frames a second, you're going to get the.
I can do it. So we shoot the best on now. Okay. So we've got 6 normally is all right. But yeah, it's a good point. It used to be at 9.
Yeah.
Right, great. So we're going to make David. Stick that in your back pocket and shove that.
No.
Right, okay, maybe a second.
Just for Monday. Monday morning, yes.
This is what I expect.
So if you get that head up, you can get some right. Yeah, that's good.
So we've got telesoftware for this as well. I'll have a telesoftware.
The idea behind it. Nice and easy. Nothing too. It's not live or anything. It takes time.
Press F5.
Absolutely, yeah. It's what we do all the time.
No, this is not really all new. So this is it's downloaded the catalog file from the system, and this is showing you what downloads are available. I'll not put you through the effort to download them because they're already on this disc.
If there's something which like
So this is my first piece of 6502 example. So be kind to it. This is monitoring the
the input signal and displaying it as a data.
So if you go a little bit that way,
It shows channels, so you can see that the different channels have got. That's the historic 1995 CFAX, where they were only using 4 lines per phase, and that's web fax. About 14. Almost, Teletext was using almost the whole thing. There's just a couple of tests. There's 16 available for Teletext. You know, the Teletext together. They were using all but 1 or 2 of them. 2 of them. 2. This is the exciting one. This is the chunky text. You might see the last 2 lines are not like showing the same pattern as everything else. In fact, actually, an interesting thing has happened again.
Chaps, we're just going to record some sound. Are you okay to keep it on door raw?
Yeah.
Just for the next That's great. We're recording now. First of all, give us your name. Nathan Dale. Yeah. Love it. Nathan, what is it you do? Tell us about this project.
So I recreate the syntax. Basically, it takes the text headline, copies the page, and makes them into text pages. Back in 1974.
Why? Why do you do this?
Well, I was interested in technology to begin with, and it was really more about the technical side of things that I started with, but then once I started working with it, I realised it's not an interesting format, and also how useful it is, because we have the text headlines and a concise format, but without all the ads and things down the side that get the web pages.
And do you think there's something particularly special and nostalgic about seeing news in digital?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I'm young enough that I sort of only barely remember this when it was on TV. But I do remember like trying to use it and filling about with it and seeing some of the interesting news that were out there. And, yeah,
I was going to say, I think you're probably the youngest person in this group. Yeah. So it's quite surprising that you are the one who's kind of keeping CFAX alive.
Yeah, well, I've had a lot of fun. I think it wouldn't have been possible without folks who are covering the old pages, because that's where I get my templates from, so that I know that's how it was. That's where I copy stuff, and I mean, they even have the Mano there as an ex-engineer who did this, they give me a lot of cycle stuff as well, so it's a collaborative effort.
Very finally, what is it about CFAX which is so special for so many people?
I think it's just the nostalgia, the remembering how simple it used to be.
And then the internet came along and and all the anger, all the hatred came out. Yeah. Brilliant stuff, well done there. Well, stay there. Let's get closer to maybe not keep that page up, but maybe not.
So that was quite prominent in the shot, obviously.
Okay. Yeah. Well, are you happy with that? That's fine, but I think let's just expose some of the other stories. No, I think it's okay. Let's look at those ones.
We won't go.
PM, not on closer to that.
Right, so you can relax.
Are we going to do? Well, I was thinking of actually.
Yeah.
That's fine. Yeah. So do you want a little? That's fine. Yeah.
Just download off the
Okay, yes. So just, I mean, so while you're getting closer,
yes, absolutely. So what are you going to point to? Tell me what you're going to point to first.
Let's talk about some of these stories here. So, okay, so
yes, go for it.
So we've got today, well, stories at the moment, so then I'm going to go to the difference is today's news stories, but in a teletext.
Yeah, we literally take news directly from the latest RSS feeds. Up to about 15 minutes.
Technically difficult, is that?
It's not too bad. The hardest bit is getting the data out of the HTML web page, and beyond that,
all these different things constantly. this is.
So once you find the data out,
No, this is
forward, I think, anyway.
because I need basically I've written something to send data out. What am I going to do?
Very good. I'm just getting some questions now.
Simplest solution.
Of the technical. Yeah,
Create a load of VDUs from
yeah, it's
to
interesting
tell
how
the BBC what they should do things.
I realised about how subtitles actually
So that's all just wrong. It's just telling to print character with character 17 and then character just gives you the store from
For testing purposes.
How many people
use this?
Yeah.
around everybody else hasn't sat there for hours watching you do it. Why do you
There's what I have here, which is where it's actually on TV. Also the web version, and then there's a live stream.
So vectors and
Between that, I'd say at least 20 hours at least. And especially whenever it's in any online article is news, it peaks and you get several hours to go on and look at it, and then that's quite fun.
Voting Monday, you'll get some of people to how do you find it? Is it a website?
So it's not supplying
Well done. That was great. Well done, sir. Thank you very much. Whilst we're in here, and people are, maybe we can get some shots of people. Yeah. Great. Well done. It was really good. Yeah.
You realise it's too broad now.
Yeah, definitely.
But not see some of the gear that makes it, that's it there.
Okay, that might be clear. It's too niche.
Attention, there are sandwiches available if there are still some left.
Okay, so if you reposition again, great. You're okay there, guys, don't worry, it's fine, you're fine. No problem at all. Sorry, you're absolutely fine. What can I just pause a second, turn on the page. What kind of response do you get from people when they see it?
I've got some really nice emails from people, and just want to folks here today who are involved in very positive. I remember using this in checkout scoreboards, and I remember different ones who worked on the service at the same time as well, and those have been very positive.
Right, so we've got that today tip that we no longer accept donations to take it home. It's quite odd seeing today's stories in a CFAX.
Yeah, it's all it should be within the last 15 minutes.
That's pretty good, isn't it? Yeah. Well, I'm hoping you get some more logging on it. Shall I get? I'm not going to bring this thing shop. Yeah. See if I can sneak in here. It's not easy. So you stay where you are. So you stay towards the end. We can cheat it a bit, so you can take it
Tomorrow I have to
brings back certain memories for certain ages. I think you just
my probably best time ever was with my dad. I used to sit in the living room and look through all the pages
you are much younger than most people here.
Yeah. But I still remember it. I mean, it was on TV or switched on. So I still remember
Right, I'm going to get a few shots of your screen if that's okay, mate, so thank you.
Yeah. That's what I thought.
You've not dug that memo out of the filing cabinet?
No, I haven't, no. Quite debating the percent, but...
Monday morning.
He's worried that he didn't want to do the reception when he's on.
Lots of story in the office. People with you. I remember 83 I got up at 2016. Oh my god. Did you get a shot of that? Yeah. That's the event. Obviously got bars on It was really good. No, you were really good.
You can service my camera if you like.
You want to get a shot? Yeah. So, what time do you think you'd like? Be quite cross people's got to go.
I was going to say, it's on your page.
It's on my page. But the thing is, what they say on the page is a bit vague.
3 o'clock? Oh.
I'm sure we can find Jason and get a picture.
Yeah, I think whilst people are kind of like milling around quite a good, lots of people doing something.
That'd be great. Yeah. Are you happy for everything you're doing? Is there anything you can be doing?
Yeah, that's right. Oh, mainly on the year. Hopefully they renew.
If I can see could you be typing stuff? I mean, we won't, nobody will sit down. I just want to see you typing.
Crash this.
No pressure. Okay, let's do a bit of that. So just be looking at it now. So you've actually got some teletext on there by the looks of it. You've actually got some pages loaded up on it.
Yeah, so this is...
I'll get a scratch on the screen. They're very old computers. I love the...
This is pulling the same system that's going into it.
Gotcha, great. That's great. We just do a bit of navigating. Will you change the pages back? Perfect. So I get that. Great. Sorry.
Well, I just get
Yeah, it's too loud in here for me to hear, which might be getting because it was beeping and bleeping like mad when I had it on the bench. Oh, there you go. I thought with all the interference of that, it was working on the bench out. I'm just trying to add another photo to it, but wait all the way around. I missed it. The thing is, I mean, you can carry any data you want. You just fill stuff in.
Nobody knows what
it might have anything to do with all because there was only one company. It's just the University of Surrey spin-off company making it stuff. It was never, that's why we've no information about it. We've never commercialised anything else. I get the impression they were all pretty well built. Yeah, a nice box with prototype boards to the side, yeah. Because they wanted to make get an ASIC, but I don't think they ever did get an ASIC. I think all the coders and decoders that went out would have the cheaper of the two DSP prototype boards in, which I think is why they were so desperate to get them back. The RNIP went around and collected them. Well, because they had hundreds of pounds worth of silicon in them. So, I mean, it's possible that Peter Wrightson is on in his cabinet at home. He's might well be the only one that exists. We don't know. I'd say they were collected up at the end of the trial. Of course, they were property of whoever was running it. I mean, if they'd have been able to mass produce them, they might not probably just chuck it away.
I was showing up all rows of my hunting viewer, and the phone went off. It went down.
Don't tell me you've crashed it.
No, I haven't crashed it. Something odd's happened.
Yeah, if you go to a different page and go back to it, will it come back and behave?
Yes, it will behave.
That's okay.
That's all right.
It's a new version of the server software that consistently crashes inconsistently.
No, it's not.
We leave it alone and stuff goes wrong, we don't know why. And his is doing
it's fine, honestly, it's fine. But you can probably see what's happening.
It's lost some of the enhancements.
Not quite. All the enhancements are there. But the background level 1 page is replaced by the
oh yes!
Teletext transmission.
I will have to write some code to make it not do that.
Well, yeah, because it must have stopped listening to the stream.
Yeah, the new server particularly is a lot more aggressive than the old one.
Yeah.
Kicking. Are you on Firefox or Chrome?
This is Chrome. Yeah,
it's worse. It's more aggressive on Firefox than it is on Chrome.
Yeah, but all the
it's not the server. It's the browsers are a bit more aggressive about killing background pages.
I'm afraid you will be.
Don't mention it to it.
On tomorrow's panel, I'm afraid you will be mentioned by name. Because mine isn't the only one. First is yours. And it runs the web browser, but still it is.
More convenient.
More convenient, yeah.
No, it's Yours is a lot easier to use than the enhancement editor.
Yeah, well, yours is
I made mine slightly less obtuse because I had to catch up with you.
Yeah, but yeah, but I think the only way of making a difference is set active position. You have to put in 43 for line 3, rotate. But that's more how the data is more faithful.
I say where's the help? Well, it's chapter so and so. There's no point in me writing it all out again, is there?
Yeah, but we can see the colour bars that come through. So the bit that does the orange bit of everyone else's is still there. Like the button is still there.
It's like you get the same effect on, if you look at the old pages, house country. That was off the BBC webpage this morning. I've not seen that photo before. I'll have that on my channel.
Yeah. I was kind of hoping that page would make it on the page. I mean, I couldn't poke it in there, but I don't like it.
Make it all go wrong and you're not there to fix it.
Plus, the fact is that I always say that straight from the BBC, I don't touch it, so I can't edit things.
Apart from that in 50 years.
That's on page 100.
And you might, and Nathan, you might be reaching near the end because you can see that.
On my
we won't see that picture. We'll just see the Whiskers artwork.
Whenever I was setting up the test video that's on the thing, I was thinking, I should have put that on there.
I've had to do a script because I'm going to lose my way from it.
And I think it was like 30.
Somebody wants to meet you tomorrow.
Oh, who's that?
There's a guy here.
Oh, there's loads of guys here.
In the room at the moment, ex-CR&D guy. His thing was done too.
Does he have a name?
I'm sure he does. I was even told it when I was introduced. Like you said, there's not guys here today.
Yeah.
But he wants to talk nerdy chat.
Is he here tomorrow as well? Yeah, just well, that's nice. Instead, last time I've got two. I don't know how much longer we're going to have.
Well, I've not been off it, I just saw it.
David did say that.
You've been sitting in that corner.
Your time to we've got to get Could you maybe like looking at some of the telly? Yeah. So we need to travel around.
Is there a
honestly next to this?
I think I already have. Well, I saw that there was a picture on the table of two together. But is there one that does a DVB-S signal as well?
Stay away on the same
DVB-S signal.
You'll find DVB-S quicker because the amateur TV people use DVB-S rather than DVB-T.
Use it for OB trucks as well, so you thank the coders for taking that, but you get them really cheap.
Probably because all the low microwave stuff is easy to get because the amateurs use it.
Yeah, so I've got a satellite receiver.
Yeah.
And instead of sending Teletext50 the dots in concept, it does HDMI as well.
I want to get Trends TV.
It's got its own Teletext built in. It's quite strange. So the set-top boxes send the picture and then send it to the HDMI.
The one I brought,
yeah, this one does both. See, this is one for us to take it to display. That's the Tele's own decode. All the characters there are coming from level 1.5, all the access characters. And this is from the satellite receiver's own decode. But most of them are not there. There's just a couple of G2 characters.
Well, it's not gone. It's missed and carrying the motor. It doesn't have them in it.
Well, it doesn't have one. Yeah. So it can do one. It's got two channels. It doesn't bother the accent. And the other interesting thing it has, if you look at the top, it says Portuguese Spanish 1 out of 3. If you look at the Teletext spec, the national option subset is 101, that's Portuguese Spanish. But it can also do Ukrainian. It can also do one other, I can't remember which one it is. But you can flip between those two. It devolves to it's on the, this is what I've read, so I can talk about today's 24/18. Yeah, I can talk about having 24/18 packets as triplet excess packets. I can talk to other people actually.
I know what you're talking about. I've implemented it, but then probably not.
Another round two to I really would like service 2.5 test together.
That would be very useful.
Yeah, you know,
You say the trouble is finding a service that's got room for it. I think it will even make it in custom service. Well, I don't remember whether it either can or that it gets to a blocking code that says to do at the top.
So magazine 4 has got nothing here. Here we've got here we've got T0 diagnosis, here we can. And diagnosis. Which is like I thought one by now. It's not
I never really see, I don't know enough about this. I never really understood.
In all these schools, don't you
The way the spec's written is like to combine. You should be able to combine any data with their account. But in reality, most of them don't exist. So they just have the ones that are actually used by any manual.
There's one example. All the enhancements and sign it's kind of my version of your we will be seeing your page 753 on tomorrow's.
That was, you know why that exists? That was the first level 2.5 page made this century. In a hexes, one character at a time. I didn't expect it to hang around this long.
And it shows
a very, very minimal function. As much as I could be bothered.
If you put everything into an active object and put my active object is a horrible
I did one experiment
I've not done that.
I probably forgot how to do it.
Well, that's where Alice is ahead of me. I've not done the RCS type.
How did you code? Did you code from the pixel at the time? Terrible.
Had a breakdown.
It's about to be on the talk. We lost the ability to look back there.
Would you ever hit that? You've got the
You have to convince you.
It's interesting if the started out on
I don't think anything
or attempt to struggle to get the trophy. So she's fine unless she sees the camera.
Digital stuff.
Say your BBC live in the background and say it's just television equivalent. This one still works.
That's how I use
Well, I did that because I was still using it to tracing. So I suspect a tracing feature might be particularly because then you're fighting between that
Ladies and gentlemen, sorry to interrupt you. I'm Tim from Big Breakfast. We've got pizza going up Monday morning about the 50th anniversary of Teletext. Thank you for doing this. It's a great thing. We're going to film the cake's been brought in. I believe Mort is going to be cutting the cake. If you need us, Mort, we can do that. So what we need you to do is all be, you don't have to be sat down, but you can just be sort of paying attention to the fact the cake has been brought in. It's really exciting. It's Teletext.
You don't have to sing happy birthday.
Yeah, exactly. Happy Teletext. So I think, well, perhaps you can sort of stand in that corner there. That's wonderful.
If I can get a sense of the corner again.
We want you in it, really. Maybe stay at the front. You just want to really go. Jim and I was the first two. I started at That's only the second ever paid employee of Sing. So, Jason, if you bring it so it's facing this way. Yep. Perfect. Wonderful. So, big round of applause from the cake and we'll be just the other way. Go for it, sir. Yeah. One. Wait a second, we're going to get this film. Hold on a second. So we're going to across there, so I'm not destroying the word teletext. Okay, Jason, just put it back down on that exact same spot. So pick it up and then put it down on the same place. Okay, so what we'll do is I need to find something to get, but I need a widening cutting as well. So what we're going to do is cut the first, close up, and then we're going to go down the front line again. Okay. Right, so I'm just going to go down that line there. Indeed you are, so bear with me a second. So I've got another cake if I want. So you can go down a second. So, okay, whenever you're ready, go. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Teletext. Happy birthday to you.
That's very nice. An added bonus. Thank you very much. We'll get Monday morning. I'll do some breakfast. So tune in and check. Thank you. Thanks. Thank you. Well
So I'm wondering good to talk so one's running in these Okay. 5 minutes,
We like the BBC stuff as well. So yeah, we do BBC stuff as well.
So you could do emulator. It's very, very good. I mean, the new ones are smooth, so it's sort of 512. Yeah.
TV is a bodies. You're not yeah, but that's my fault. People are taking photos of it. Service, shall I have a service notes rebooted? It's all right. That goes again. It's doing its thing. I might just put their Wi-Fi on their laptop, but it's not our fault at all.
I'm just going to have a wee look and make sure it's not doing it here as well.
Sometimes I have to coax on the television. Take 100 for the bill.
Not anymore. I think the reason I stopped doing it was because the picture inside television centre that shows the newer I know when BBC Two went off in Northern Ireland, we got
that would be enrolled in the service.
Apparently that's interactive. I don't know, I've never been on there.
Well, that's when it loses the link from downstream. Nobody's still coming on. When just as you change the logo, nobody's going to join it to transmit the same and change it wrong. So I think it's going to see
Next day.
Well, that was popular. Everyone's clammed up. Wait, no, they're all here. I'm just saying. He's made his bed.
Yes. Carlos Remo. Everybody can see you in the room now, so please don't make noise.
And they just they decided they had to have a match. So Steve all masses and said program they he says it's the most horrible thing, most horrible thing to program. Because it's a music production software, sound that needs to work. So Apple every 5 minutes changes the sound API. So a lot of stuff is supported on the new version. So it's right all
just a little bit of housekeeping. If you're here after the main event, afterwards, it's compulsory to go to the pub after the main. Which pub is it? Jason's fine. What pub are we going to? Devonshire Arms. It's down by the train station. Last of the month. It's problematic. I tell you, this is a very over-engineered solution just to get the co-host of this particular section in the room. But it's elegant. And I've got everyone's attention now. Right, okay, right. Yeah, I can. I will do that actually. Right, I'm going to turn you around. What? Yeah, just forget I said that. Oh yeah, cake. Oh, they're all Russian. Right, okay.
Bring it round.
Have you seen enough now? That's good, isn't it?
Yes, sorry, I was just messing.
Oh, you're doing your famous Wigan Saturday tonight.
I'm doing my taxes.
You've done your taxes. Smashing you. We can take to a few then. Finished. Oh, you don't want to talk about that.
No, we didn't lose.
Oh well, that's good. That's like us, we're busy not losing at the moment, so that's good. Okay, right, I'll speak down a second. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, while you're all enjoying your cake and we're listening to a nice bit of ukulele music in the background there, as provided by MRG Systems employee Peter Kwan with his inflatable.
I'm drinking, I say MC Pizza Pop.
Oh, it could be like a non-playable character, yeah. Okay. Right, happy birthday, Teletext, indeed. Okay, well, thank you very much, and I hope you all had a refreshing break. And I've spoken to your agents about getting on the old, once you're all on BBC Breakfast on Monday. So that's very good. I'd like to welcome you formally to the Teletext Sofa Club, which is going to be very, very dynamic today. And what I mean by dynamic, I mean I'm making it up as I go along, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to first of all introduce you to Dan Ferryman, who is the co-host of the Teletext Sofa Club. He is, I think it's been coined as the other tube of adhesive, or the other tube of epoxy resin in the Teletext sort of like messing about scene. And he's joining us from our Wigan office because, as we all know, all media corporations are all going up north, so they put him up here first. So a big round of applause, please, for Mr. Dan Ferryman. Right, well, on this very special edition of the Sofa Club, it is my absolute pleasure to actually, if you told me that I'd get these two people in the same room 2 years ago, not because that they're going to punch each other or anything like that, but they've, in the interviews that they've done for our documentary that Dan and I worked on, they came across with two unique perspectives of the same event, and it's absolutely brilliant to have it as a privilege to have them both in the room together. So first of all, I'd like to call up Graham Lovelace to the front, where he will hopefully find a chair, and a round of applause, please. Right, and then my second guest in the blue corner is the second, well, the first ever paid employee of CFAX, the second ever sub-editor, and also he wasn't an Albanian irredentist, which we're all pleased about, because has he worked, if he was, then Colin McIntyre wouldn't have had him on board working with Ian Irving. So I would like to welcome Mort Smith. Nice to see you too. That's brilliant, lovely. Okay, well, if you excuse the Heath Robinson sound. Oh, yes, and hello to Dan. Yes. Okay, right. Right, okay, well, I try and keep my talking down to a minimum, but I just want to give you a little bit of context as to why these two gentlemen are so important to the history of Teletext. And mainly it's because it's down to these two gentlemen that we've got a Teletext at all either to lament, moan about, or celebrate. So, as I've alluded to already, Ian worked at CFAX. He then worked at, he went over to the United States and started their CFAX movement over there for a little while, and then came back and ran a little company called Intelfax. And then that's where the sliding doors moment comes in, because this gentleman here to stage left is in fact Graham Lovelace, who was in charge of Teletext with a capital T service, which took over Oracle. It won a bidding process, and it won the bid that our man Mort put in for as well. So we have one person that won a bid in a tender, and we've got one person who lost the bid in the same tender. And we still like each other. And so this is why this is a very special podcast, because we can, keep saying podcast or podcast all the time. very special panel because it will be really interesting to get a unique perspective on how both teams went about it. But it won't just be about that. If there are any questions at all, please flick the hand up. I'll come and find you, and we can ask away. So I just want to really start the panel by asking if we can go to the point where you were putting in, I guess it would be right to say, you know, you're putting in a bid for the new service, and and if you could explain about why that had come about.
The IBA, which administered ITV and Channel 4, decided that they had already been operating on the basis of offering franchises for different television companies to run the different regional operations on ITV. And they decided that it would be appropriate to do the same thing with Teletext. Oracle had been running Teletext virtually on ITV virtually since it started. I think I'm right in saying, Graham, that was 1976 for Oracle. And they invited bids for interested companies to operate the Teletext franchise on ITV and Channel 4. There were 5 organisations that bid for it. Teletext Limited, who ultimately won it, were one. Oracle, the incumbents, were 2. Intelfax was backed by Carlton Communications, who ran the London weekday television operation. The ITN were another bidder, and my mind has gone completely blank. Press Association.
No, there was mine's gone blank, but PPO was a supplier to us. It was a player.
Right. Anyway, there were 5 bids. Intelfax persuaded Carlton, who were backing us. We were the sort of lead, if you like, because we knew Teletext and they didn't. But they decided that they wanted to be involved in the Teletext franchise. And right from the beginning, we told them that it was going to cost a lot of money to win the Teletext license. And they said, yeah, of course, you know, we'll be there. And when it came to it, they were prepared to bid £3.6 million for the licence. Oracle bid £6.7 million for the licence, and Teletext Limited bid
£8.2 million a year.
So it was no contest. It came down to the number at the bottom. That was how it was decided. And as Intelfax and Carlton, we put a huge amount of effort into producing what we thought was a really good proposal for Teletext. But as I say, it didn't really make the slightest bit of difference because we didn't bid enough money and we didn't win it. So I think this is where I pass over to Graham.
So at that time, that's probably May '92 when it was announced. I was working as a duty editor at CFAX, where what was still referred to almost daily. Very few people in our industry are known by just one name.
I hadn't paid my bar bill, that was why.
And I remember writing the story that Associated New called qualifying revenue. It's a percentage of the advertising as well, so it's an enormous amount of money. Sat in the seat openly laughing, thinking this company, this RTM-centric called John Home. And John at that stage, as a consultant editor, John had worked in TV before. There was a guy from the Mail on Sunday who never worked in the medium. I had this very, very quick interview which basically said, how soon could you start? In 1992, working in Farm Lane, and the very first of those, but the rest stuck with that application. We worked very hard, we got the service on air, so that takes us through to
a really interesting time because you're beginning to, obviously, you've got then.
And One of them that was particularly successful was Granada, and we worked very closely with a guy called Martin Rattle, who was their advertising sales director. And Granada were one of the few companies, maybe possibly even the only company, who could see the benefits of getting television and teletext to work together. So if, I'm just picking an example out of the air here, if Ford were going to launch a new car, they'd use the television as the visual image promoter, and they'd use teletext to provide all the details of engine sizes, different specifications, etc., etc. And it worked particularly well for Granada, to the point where we actually got invited to go to see the Monaco Grand Prix on Granada, because we'd made them rather a lot of money.
So that was like, I guess, a precursor to the red button, where you would all press the blue button when the advert's on, and that would give you more information about what was on the screen.
Yeah, the point really was that if the new Ford car came in N different options, you'd have to take a very long advert, which would cost you a very large amount of money. Whereas if you could use it just as a positive image of the out of the car as it looked, and use teletext to provide all the details, that was much cheaper.
I see, yeah, okay. And then, so with the services you've mentioned before, when you went live, you took plenty of phone calls from people who were, where's my knitting page, where's this, where's that, and you know, you felt like you wanted to sit in a dark room somewhere, I'd imagine. Were there any sort of like limitations that you weren't expecting when you took the system on? I'm sort of really, I think I'm not trying to touch on really is that the fact you've got Jason over there who's recovering a lot of services now, and where at the time you weren't able to produce that. Was there any times when you wished that he was about to reproduce those images?
Yeah, I'll come to that in a moment, because we were always told at the time this can't be done. In fact, we went to great elaborate means to actually try and record and visually capture teletext pages using Polaroid cameras. It was extremely hard. We had to record everything on tape, but actually grabbing live pages or recovering pages that had been broadcast in certain regions was extremely hard. But it's worth, yeah, in terms of limitation, the public teletext license that Teletext had won was for 7.5 VPI lines. Now, I think CFX at the time had 12, I think, and Oracle probably ran on probably 11, 10 or 11, 12 probably as well. So the ITV regions had 1.5 lines for the ancillary services. They created in the Broadcasting Act a data broadcasting capability, which was another license that was pitched for, and I think that was 1.5 to 2 lines. So we were massively restricted by VPI lines, which meant we had huge ambition in terms of number of pages and magazines and things we wanted to do, but we just did not have the capacity, the broadcast capacity, to get all of that on air live all the time. So the only solution around that was to come up with thematic magazines that would run at different times of the day. And that's why we have had we launched with certain editions, and they would change. There were problems with that, obviously, because people would remember certain page numbers or whatever, and then they'd look for something later and it wasn't there. So the good news was this was a short-lived thing. It was part of the original launch service, which was completely repaginated around, I think it was sort of April, May time, 1993, when we put right a lot of the things that were wrong with the service. I've worked on a number of media launches before. I mentioned BSB, that was another very short-lived thing. It was 8 glorious months before it was taken over by Sky. I've worked with other large startups before. Startups are always tricky. It's probably true to say that they're always a bit of a failure at launch, and the thing you've got to quickly do is put things right and take some really bold moves. And we took some very bold moves to get on air, and we took even bolder moves for getting it right after we went on air. And that was the point around May time that I became the editor of Teletext. I had been the deputy editor. And there was a reason for that, which we'll come on to probably later in terms of one of the services that we had on air at the time. But that limitation factor was constantly with us. It was with us for many, many years. I think Teletext eventually either did a deal with the ITC and grabbed some of that data broadcasting capacity. That's right, and they eventually did go back to up to 16 lines. But if you imagine, we were launching with this huge ambition and this tiny pipe to get those pages around the country. And that's exactly what we were doing. We were sending pages live to transmitters around the country, 28 transmitters, and the pages were being inserted into the VBI signal at the transmitters, which itself had never been done before and was extremely tricky, because what would happen is, as we all know, computers stick, they freeze. So we'd have, every now and again, we'd have a situation where pages wouldn't update in certain regions. We'd have to manually, remotely reboot a PC to make them work again.
Yeah, we now saw about Esmeralda about that, don't we, Mort?
Talking about rebooting computers, Ian Irving and I will remember this very well. When CFAX started in 1974, it was transmitted via something called a core store, which held up to 30 pages and no more. And obviously that wasn't very satisfactory. So Colin McIntyre, who was the editor of CFAX, pushed very hard to get the resources to commission a company, an outside company, to build a teletext editing and transmission computer, which was duly installed at CFAX, I'm guessing, but that must have been midway through 1975, something like that. And Colin McIntyre, who had a glorious sense of humour, nicknamed this machine Esmeralda. It was a 19-inch rack-mounted machine, and he called it Esmeralda for a very good reason, because it was the most capricious thing I've ever seen in my life. And on occasion, the teletype machines would be banging out information, and you'd be typing away, putting news pages together, and Esmeralda would go, "I've had enough. I'm not going to work. No, sod off. No, not interested." And what you had to do then was to walk round to the back where Esmeralda was based and push a reboot button when the whole thing shut down and started up again, and then it might work for a bit. And I don't know whether Ian will remember, excuse me, but I think that the record number of reboots in a single day was 138. And we used to take it in turns to do it.
Does that mean that CFAX went off the air when the computer?
It was still transmitting, you just couldn't put anything new into it, so the news could be 4 hours old. And that went on for about a year and a half, and then the BBC got bored with it, and they went to a company called Logica and said, build us a teletext transmission system, which they did. And it was a really professional, it was, I don't know whether Oracle actually used a Logica system as well. And I know they used Aston terminals to create the pages. And a very clever man called Ray Goff, who was a software writer for Logica, was an amazing guy. He used to come into the CFAX newsroom and watch what people were doing and come up to a sub-editor who'd been doing graphics and say, "Why are you doing that?" And he'd explain why he was doing that. And Ray would say, "There's a much better way to do it." And he'd go away and write a software patch and come back and install it. And magically it would work to do exactly what you wanted it to do. But the whole ethos of teletext, I think, was channeled by this wonderful man called Colin McIntyre. I know I keep mentioning his name. As far as I am concerned, he is the father of teletext. He started it, he pushed it, and he made it work. And that's the end of the advert.
I'd say Colin was the godfather, you're the father of Teletext and CFAX, so we followed in your footsteps. Just looking over there, that BBC Micro brings a lot of memories back. That's what I used at CFAX to get pages to air. Next to that was a dot matrix printer. That's all we had to record stuff and print stuff off. Behind that was the bank of news agency terminals. You would go over and tear off a story, balance it on your keyboard, write it as fast as you could. And then we'd do this amazing illusion. So the person writing the story would put their hand up and say, I've finished the story, and then I, as the duty editor, would then get the headlines ready, someone else would update the news index, someone else would do the fast text, and all 4 machines would simultaneously put that page to air, giving the illusion to the audience that it was all automated. None of it was.
It's very effective.
Very, very effective, and it was the quickest means of getting any news story to air, and just probably worth just mentioning about the role of, or the position of CFAX within the BBC. They never really knew what they had. Never, ever really cherished this amazing thing. It had been in many different departments. It had been in the presentation department at one stage.
It started in
Engineering, yeah.
It was a presentation, then it went somewhere else, and finally ended up in news.
Yeah. And there was a massive overcorrection when it did go to news. It became very, very, very news-driven, news-laden. A lot of the fun elements of CFAX went, and of course that was a big opportunity for Teletext Limited to bring those back for a rival service.
Yeah, with the you talking about when it went into sort of like the Burt era of CFAX, which everyone sort of remembers, whether that's fondly or not, I don't know. What we mean by that is a lot of the audiences went in depth from BBC Two and in brief from BBC One, I think.
So as the duty editor of CFAX, I used to have to attend a meeting at 8 o'clock in the morning, hosted by the head of news, and all the major correspondents would be in there at the time. It's Polly Toynbee, Peter Jay, all the famous names on the TV screen. They all started off with what was the news agenda of the day and what happened the previous day, and they always turned to me as the CFAX guy to say that. But from that point on, CFAX, as far as they're concerned, didn't really exist. They weren't big users of it. They looked down their nose at it. They sneered at it. They didn't see CFAX journalists as proper journalists. And of course, they are journalists exemplars. They are absolutely superb journalists in terms of speed, accuracy, and brevity. 3 huge skills that many journalists never really crack. But that was that thing again, that sort of inferiority complex that the medium had within Teletext, that when we won the franchise backed by Associated Newspapers, my boss was Sir David English, former editor of the Daily Mail. This was a big, shiny opportunity for them to get into something which was broadcasting. None of that inferiority complex existed, but I still felt that, talking to CFAX people many, many years later, that they were still under this, they were still in the office was stuck nowhere near the main newsroom at the time, directly opposite the Top of the Pops office, Jimmy Savile's office, remember, directly opposite the CFAX office. Esme, the teammate, coming around every day.
Oh, Esme, wonderful lady.
Yeah. So
frightened the life out of everybody.
Terrifying, actually. Yeah, terrifying. So yeah, it's just that position is just worth remembering, that all you see and everything in terms of CFAX, it was a victory over culture at the BBC, and at Teletext it was a victory and triumph over the technology.
One thing I would say, I think at the BBC, the reason for what Graham's just described is because they saw Teletext as competing with their major product, television. You know, we don't want people turning off and looking at CFAX, we want them to look at our wonderful pictures. And they missed the opportunity, which Channel 4 later took, to say we can make television and teletext work together. When Intelfax bid for the Channel 4 teletext contract, it was on the basis that the only thing 4Tel was going to do was to support the programmes. And that covered anything you can think of, from inviting people to come and take part in the programmes, from providing synopses and previews of the programmes, to say which programmes were subtitled and which weren't. And it worked really well. It became a symbiotic relationship instead of a confrontational one, which is what Graham's talking about.
Just because Teletext, because the Teletext medium, but CFAX as a service again was at the absolute pinnacle of the news sort of pyramid. So something would happen and CFAX would need it to air immediately. We therefore got the brunt of the viewers' calls coming through to start to complain about the coverage of certain stories. So I remember the time it was the fall of Yugoslavia. I mentioned this to a couple of people earlier, and There was something called the Bosnian Information Service, led by a guy called Mr. Gravolovic, who every evening at 7 o'clock would spend nearly an hour and a half going through every single story on CFAX of the day, trying to put the record straight in his own mind at the time when Bosnian Serbs were lobbying missiles into marketplaces. And that just took an enormous amount of time. But again, memory, taking that into Teletext, where we had to record every single viewer's call, we had to treat every single phone call diligently and politely, and so those early days when we had a lot of calls, where's my knitting pattern, where's my angling page, all of that had to be very, very carefully recorded. And it probably still appears in some of those ITC annual reports that people every now and again refer back and say the one from 1993 was terrible. It was shocking.
I have one question in from Dan, who we've lost on the feed, unfortunately. But he wants to know whether Esme was the teammate in relation to Esmeralda.
No, definitely not. Although she could have been, given they were both extremely capricious.
Right, okay, yes. Oh, there you have it, that's it. Yeah, so with the minefields that you're all treading through, both of you creating news, it's been commented to me in the past about previous CFAX employees and how they felt in a way that they were sort of like felt a little bit lower in the pecking order to the real broadcasters, the real people in the news and things like that. But when you actually look at back now, everybody here would agree that you'd have one page of text and there was no room for speculation in there. It told you exactly what it was, and it was up to the user to decide whether it was true or not. And perhaps its limitation, would you agree, its limitation sort of helped with getting the message across to people?
Yeah. I think writing for Teletext was the best journalistic training in the world, because you had to summarise the story in 80 words if you only had one page. If you added rolling pages, you obviously had room to expand a bit more, but you also had to remember that people would not always come in at page 1 of a rolling page, so you had to re-summarise the major point of the story on each subsequent page. But I think it was absolutely brilliant training for writing concisely.
I totally agree, and this was so just going back to the first months of 1993, service was on air. We had outsourced news, sport, racing and finance to the Press Association. The Press Association is the national news agency where Ian worked before. I'd worked as a PA reporter in Parliament before. No problem with accuracy. Everything that PA did, the watchword was accuracy. But everything that PA had done for over a century was going to be rewritten by a journalist at the other end. So as a news agency, they produce stories and they go into newsrooms, and then someone, as we were doing at CFAX, would rewrite it. They never had that responsibility for something going into nearly 16 million households every day, right in front of their living rooms, news and information we absolutely had to rely on and trust. So getting PA into that cultural mindset that you are now responsible for this service, there's no way we're going to check every single story you write. You have to take responsibility for this service. But we had other problems, so that was the problem we had with putting this contract together with the Press Association. So that was a multi-million-pound contract with PA. None of that taking responsibility for the service was in the contract, and they always envisaged that we would check every single page that went on air, because PA thought if the service updated 30 times a day, that was really good. Of course, it updated on some days, if you included racing or budget day, 28,000 times a day.
As sort of like these services improve, the more information they can capture as well. So it's sort of like a self-fulfilling prophecy, isn't it? The more you can capture, the more you have to report. The more you report, the more you have to capture. When I was doing my research for the documentary, I did find it quite fascinating that being an innovator sometimes is a bit of a curse, because when you're an innovator, you have to take Esmeralda. When you're the person that supersedes it, you can take whatever technology has to offer after that. I think that's already been seen with HD switch over from in the BBC services. You know, it's sort of like, why can't they do it this way? Why can't they do it quickly? Well, it's because they were the first to bring HD out. Therefore, they don't have all the improvements that you can get through making mistakes that the other ones have. And talking about innovation, it brings me onto holidays, because the holidays was a major source of income for the Teletext with a capital T company, and more so than Oracle. But there was a specific reason for that, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think at its height, Teletext was responsible for 40% of the UK holiday market. That was largely the late availability and late flights end of the market, which obviously has all gone online since. What Oracle had done is similar to the sort of mindset that many people had, like the PA guys had, that if holiday page is updated once a day per advertiser, that's good, isn't it? It's a price. People will phone that number, and that's it. And that's what Oracle did. The pages would update infrequently. We took the same attitude that we did with PA and others and said to holiday advertisers, and indeed the bookmakers, we're going to put equipment in your premises, we're going to update your own pages. You need to make sure it's legal, decent, honest and true. We're regulated. You make a mistake, we'll lose our license, we'll sue you. But this is the way that you will create a futures market, and that's what happened. So the prices were dynamic. So there would be, at the height of the season, 2 weeks in Greece for £7. 10 minutes later it was £70, probably 10 minutes after that it was £250. But that £7 holiday did exist, and it was rigorously policed and obviously very, very carefully looked at by the regulator all the time. But we would do spot checks, we would do ghost calls to the advertisers, but it worked, and they took it very seriously. And you know, there'd be the occasional issue where pages would stick, as we talked about, and Teletext was a direct response advertising medium. What would happen is individuals with no premises, no offices, no travel agents whatsoever, they would buy on the spot market a whole load of flights taking off from next Tuesday at a certain airport, and they would offload those flights onto Teletext over 5 or 6 days. And the same thing would happen with late availability holidays, hotels, destinations, etc. And that created, again, this sort of futures market where customers, viewers were guaranteed a bargain, really, because everyone was in competition with each other, and they would look at each of their own pages and compare the prices with all the others. And there were hundreds of advertisers in there. I had a meeting late 1990s. Teletext was invited to join a consortium bidding for something. It may have been an early version of the 3G license or something. But anyway, in the room was Brent Hoberman and Martha Lane Fox, who were then consultants working for somebody, and they said they had this idea for a late availability holiday market, and they were going to model it on Teletext. Something discussed later that Teletext could have become and never did.
Just goes to show that you were a long way ahead of the rest of the world at that point.
And that's a point we could touch on now, because our biggest export in the early 1980s was in fact Mort Smith. Because
I've been described as many things, but an export.
An export, yeah, well, that's it, because Teletext went all over the world. It went to the United States, and it was I believe that you worked for, was it Cincinnati or Keyfax?
It was Keyfax in Chicago. I think I've told this story before, so forgive me if you've heard it before. But I was on duty at CFAX with a guy called Pete Winter, who was a Kiwi, and we both ended up showing around. We did it on a very regular basis. Broadcasters came from all over the world to see what the BBC had done with CFAX. And this guy came in, and his name was Benjamin Barton Smiley III. Snappy, he was a Texan, and his boss was had been in the UK. His boss was a guy called Marshall Field, and he'd been here for a conference, and he'd seen Teletext. Well, Marshall Field owned the Chicago Sun-Times newspaper. He also owned 5 UHF TV stations and a lot of news gathering operations.
And he made the connection. He thought, we could do that in the States, and it can make money for us. So we showed Ben around. We also introduced him to Logica, who made the BBC system. And he went back and had a meeting with his boss, who said, right, go back over there. I want you to buy a teletext system from these Logica people, and I want you to find a couple of people who can come over to Chicago and set it up and run it. And that was me and Peter. And talk about culture shock. Having worked at the BBC for 7 years, where you had to go through 57 different committees to get anybody to agree to anything, arriving in the United States, they basically said, you can do what the hell you like, buddy. If you get it wrong, you're out the door. If it works, well done, you get a bonus. And it was like starting CFAX all over again. There were no teletext sets at all in Chicago, not one. So they went to a company called Zenith Electronics and said, you make televisions, make us some teletext decoder equipped televisions. And they ended up making 200 as a first batch. And there's a story that I'll go back to in a minute about those 200 televisions, which ended up in the bay of the Keyfax office in Chicago. But they slowly got shipped out to various people, and very, very slowly it started to take off. We recruited journalists, we had actually quite a large production operation going. And the WFLD was the local television station in Chicago, and it went off air from midnight until 6 o'clock in the morning. So they said, if we left the transmitters on, could you do rolling teletext, like an InVision, between midnight and 6 o'clock? And we said, yeah, we could do that. And they said, okay, well, you set that up, we'll get a license from the music industry so we can put rock music behind it. And a thing called Night Owl was born, and it was made up of 15-minute orbits, sections of sports, news, features, quizzes, weather, financial information, going round and round and round. And Ian will remember this, because he did quite a lot of the graphics for us when we first started up. We were transmitting them at the rate of 1 page per second, because we're only using a couple of VBI lines. But we had animations in this InVision of rockets taking off, submarines surfacing, doors opening, a cuckoo clock, all sorts of different things. And it actually registered 3.8 on the Nielsen and Arbitron ratings, which are the people who monitored television watching. So these are like several 100,000 people in the Chicago metropolitan area watching our teletext pages going out. And it just took off like gangbusters. It was absolutely amazing. And when we went over there, my wife, Judy, had just had our daughter, Claire. So she'd been uprooted, taken halfway across the world, away from all the support, all the family, everybody else, and she wasn't at all sure about whether that was a good idea or not. Nearly 2 years later, a gentleman called Rupert Murdoch bought the Chicago Sun-Times and said, get rid of that teletext nonsense, we don't need it. So they pulled the plug on it. And that's how I ended coming back to the UK. Colin McIntyre, my ex-editor from CFAX, called me up and said, look, I'm working for this funny little company called Intelfax. They've won a contract from Channel 4 to provide program-related teletext. They want me to edit it. I said, I've just given up 35 years of working at the BBC. I do not want another full-time job. Are you interested? So I said, yeah. And I came back, and the rest, as they say, is history.
Oh, thank you for that, Paul. Yeah, it's good. What we'll do is we'll probably, before we'll just take a comfort break in a moment and get back to part 2, which will be like the the accomplishments of teletext and where we think it would be putting the world to rights, maybe with the implications of AI and things like that, which would be quite interesting. But before we do, I just wanted to ask Graham about the innovations of maybe other things that didn't quite take off or took off in a funny way at Teletext.
Yeah, so obviously there were not. Once we got the pagination right, once we had put all the pages in the right places, I'm talking when we launched, for instance, news was on Channel 4, should be on ITV, so we put news on ITV, all those sort of things. We got rid of the themed editions, different times of the day, all of that went. I think some of the sort of social side, the soft side, so obviously anything to do with parenting children, the children's pages, so Bamboozle was huge from day one. That was a big innovation using hexadecimal pages. Not the first time they'd been used, but to actually use that and engage an audience. It was a big audience that would wait for that 12-day news. But yeah, some of the softer sides. So, for instance, within the, I'm not sure exactly where it was. It was in Teen Zone, I think it was called originally. We had an agony uncle page run by the late Nick Fisher, TV writer, and who also did our Anglian pages. And he'd been an agony uncle for a magazine, and he said it's this untapped area. Boys have nowhere to go to when they have a problem, when they have social problems. They've got, there isn't such a thing as an agony uncle. I will be your agony uncle. And he got a huge post back, and it was posted these days. There was no email or postcards, but it was letters, and he would share them with me. And these were really, really difficult things he was answering, and probably picking on a certain subject. So that was big. Later, we had a number of innovations around what we call live text, so using the telephone keypad as a return path so that viewers could put messages on the screen. They could sell things through small ads. This, we'll talk about that after. And various other things, but that was again the softer side of that was during the Dunblane massacre. Viewers started sending us messages of condolence to the people of Scotland, people of Dunblane, and we then made that free phone, and that was huge, absolutely huge. We did a number of those things when it happened, so that was a big. I mean, that was a precursor again. What Teletext could have become a social network, but again, something hard to.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think what we'll do, if that's okay with everybody, we're just going to take 5 minutes out, just for a bit of a break, and then we'll come back for part 2. But thank you so much to our guests today, Ian and Graham. Thank you.
No, they're all. If it's empty, it's not in use.
I just bought, I don't normally buy Android apps. It's not because I got anything against it, I just don't normally need to.
Yeah.
Just this app, it's like, oh, you want to do $4.79 and then it was 50% off of it. So that we have to so let me do the movie camera while filming as well. So I don't like not having it, so no under off and it's gone. So I might do a bit of the camera afterwards if you want to be on it. I'll try not to dive into it, but you can see it. No, I honestly thought they finished because he was right on the camera, so it's like, alright, they're done now, because the camera's not pointing at anything. And as I'm walking over here, let's have a look at it. Oh, let's go over here. They're still going, yeah. How was that? She finished it.
Maybe enthusiastic. It's just touching any of this spaghetti and it falls. Yeah, as long as you're not 4G. That's off. Jam all our TV shows. So what's your new? Is that your new machine? Did you make some hardware? No, the only hardware I made is this floppy drive. Because I wanted to use 3.5 drive because I had problems with floppy. No, all of my stuff has been software. So when you do that schematic, so I could sit in a room and just go. Well, that was to try and figure out how to do this thing. It's so convoluted. Because they basically took the guns out of one of these 80s tellers and took away everything they didn't need as a teller and put it in the watch. And this just the signal comes in and it puts the packet into there's one cable it just loads the packet with data in and it comes in and then it just races it into things and says there's some data, do what you like with it, which is good in a way because it means like software I've written as possible. The newer, the later ones, I mean Jason's got a little box, but that uses a more modern TV, which does all the decoding internally in the chip, and it just talks I2C to adapter that you talk to. So it just says, please go and get page 100. You've got page 100, okay, what's the date for page 100? It means you can only do total. I have experience here, whereas this can get all of the bits and leave it lights. I'll start at the beginning. I'll start at the end, but it's the beginning of the story. I'd experimentally tell it off a bit, but I was doing it all by hand. So I finally got around to writing software to generate the pages for me, rather than having to do it in Excel. So my first one is 10. Print hello world, 28 10, that's the program. But they want to have the ability to generate proper software. I had to learn 65 to assembly and write something proper. So I'm not putting you through the effort of actually downloading, it's easy. But I've got two programs, one of which is called Monitor. This is my first bit of 6502, so a bit and this just, when the instruction comes up, it just brings the data in and throws it to the screen. So that's the 1985 CFAX. The COVID inspired 1985. And then this is chunky text. So if you look closely at the data chunky text, there's something different. There's like web flags and NMSC flags. But look at that one and see if you see anything different. The bottom two, well, you always get that sort of effect because as the pages scroll through, it gives you but yeah, the bottom two lines in each field, the MRAC isn't changing. And that's because these are data codes. So that's pack 31 so that's scrolling data codes. So if I come out of that and I load the data codes, it's going to look really on channel 4. If I start with SPA, these are my available data sets. So the first one, of course, has to be CFAX. So if I call service package SC,
Ladies and gentlemen, we've got lookings here doing pan shots and things like that, so if you wanted to go up and start poking teletext and all that around, that would really help them out immensely. Thank you.
Paper bag over the air, Venus mask. So, just saying what it is. Then we get to the more exciting ones, for example. had to think of some data to transfer. That's the trouble. You write all the code, which is easy for me, and then you think, now, what commercial customers am I actually going to bring on board to send data casts at 6 inches? So that's throwing away the draw.
I started doing a stream like radio, and it's not different beast. Similarities, but way different. It's not too
Obviously we came in halfway through, so cycle through it, prints the same, does the same vectors in 3 different modes, so you get full colour and 4 colours. That's one thing. And then I thought I've got to do something special for the last one, so yeah, I was coming halfway. I saw these drawings. Again, it's done in the most stupid way possible. I'm sending VDU commands to say define a character. Character 254, I think. Here's the 8 bytes to define the character. Okay, now print it and move on to the next one. Position it here, print it, and so on. But I didn't want to write a second program to do graphics. I've written the program to do text, and doing that is the easiest way to. You're going to hide, yes. Yeah.
I don't know if screen burn too much. That one's got it. This one was linked to
Headline for all of the day.
that one's not too bad. Although that one gives an old shell and it's got more guts in it, so kind of cheated it. I tried to get too much screen but on the kind of tubes on this one.
Well, hang on, it's not got that communications room in it, has it? Has bits.
Yeah, other guy logs in New Year's Eve and goes from December to January. Oh yeah. I like watching it going on YouTube.
I don't like to watch that. Despite the fact that code has been working, you've got it locked in there. Despite the fact that code's been working for 6 years now, every daylight savers, both ends, it's worked perfectly. I'm still convinced it's all going to explode. What will Linux change? The worst thing is the page, the world clock page, because I have a script, it has to catch the time zone changes between inputs. And they're all different.
Because I remember there was a clock on C5.
Still there.
It's still there.
How do you generate the time? Oh, you should not get it.
I used to have
I'm not bothered digging it.
Yeah, I used to have my own, but whenever I read it on Sims,
Don't go into PHP on that. Not really right.
I couldn't be bothered to rewrite mine again.
It's interesting because my apprentice is to do with a space program.
I mean, these
Poland when the shuttle was going, and I'm still doing that because there's rocket launches and I'm watching it.
They always tell you in
so it's in Easter time, so something like that is not, something like that, it's actually, it helps.
I just mean there's easier ways to get the information.
I love this 150 news flash. I remember sitting back in 1980 and taking 150 and it would come up on that. I mean, I remember when you got actually, we got actual news flashes back in the day come on, you'd be watching Coronation Street or whatever it was on, and the screen would go blank, and then at ITN, and it's quite scary because some stage it's not the same How can you get that cycle 6 pages? Is that something you've written into or well, because I've got the bigger version of that. It's exactly, I've got the 40 and 43 inch one. And the software's identical. Because I've got no way to get teletext.
Yes, there's vague differences between different generations of films. Because I've not got it out because we haven't exposed it, but I've got 22-inch version.
Is it possible to have you sat there doing
series 4, and it's nearly the same. Or just sitting looking at the different colours. This has got the Ampere with the
you just see people interacting.
Yeah, most of the software is the same. There's odd things that are different. You think it's odd that they tinker around with this stuff? And you think how many people use it? I suppose the culture of Philips they were so involved in it.
They were the first one to produce that.
Oh, hang on. I thought it was a problem.
I was about to I remember
you guys going back to the CFAX page.
So that time we literally Teletext, and it was something like £250. So in today's money, this is
twiddly wheels on the back. Move a fraction of a degree and you don't.
I saw the E-format that had the airship in 1980. That's the highlight so far.
Yeah, this is quite fabulous. So, if we have a final page.
So you're trying to get back to CFAX, yeah?
This is CFAX, which is... You can have CFAX on this.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Make this one go back and come back on the page. Go back on something else. Can you say any of those favourite numbers?
This is late. This is 7.
So the user guides you bought as they are the originals from ITT.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the user guide for the original Acorn software, and then it was published so you can have a play with it. And it's got both novels with Kill and now you will need the book. Your first challenge is change back to short text, which is on 4.
Exactly. Oh, so someone's going to change the UHF challenge.
Yeah. Teletext terminal.
Okay, so you can change the UHF. Right, I can do this.
We're on the right
channel. So, will we tell us that's on which one?
We're on 4. What you would expect to happen now if it was by the same page 100 one. That's not happening. That's page 200. Look at you, look at you.
Just photograph
coffee.
So then you key in. You can also we'll send you what it does and you just put it on the ROM store. Spectrum, I really want to as well. The hardware will read all of them, sort of. The ROM captures and you can set it full, so it gets very analog.
Yes.
Monostable with a sort of a timeout set. To the end of the thing, it starts to read, so it drops things and gets messy. Their solution is just to set the ROM to say stop looking at the world. When, I mean, at the time, CFAX was only using 4 lines rather than the or an empty box anyway. Box right. That's the Kincaid delay. Hot start. Interested in any display chips? Chips. Interesting. I think they're all not interested in those. So I think they're all on
And this one's French Arabic.
I have some of those, yeah.
You can't get rid of them, can you?
Those are the ones that are in, you know, the DTP 900 has those in?
That one says which country. Which country it's from. But I don't know if you want any of these, or all of them.
Add them to stock.
Random display.
Thank you. Welcome back to part 2 of the Sofa Club special, the one with the big heavyweights in, which is absolutely brilliant. Okay, and where we left it was I'm determined to know sets, which we never found out about. Mark. So if you want to tell us about that, that'd be great. Yeah, that'd be good.
Yes, so there are these 200 senior television sets that all stack up on the loading bay of the Keycom Electronic Publishing Office in Elk Grove Village, just north of Chicago. And Julie and I and Pete Winter, who were the three people involved in organising it, were absolutely knackered after about 6. And Pete had this great idea: we would hire a log cabin in Wisconsin, which is the next state along from Illinois. So we jump in his pickup and go off and have a wonderful weekend, barbecuing, just relaxing. We're coming back into Chicago, and Pete says, "Oh, I just need to pick up something from the office." I just need to pick up something from the office. So we drive in behind Keycom Electronic Publishing. Pete goes up the steps. Judy and I stayed in the pickup. These cars come screaming round the corner and pull up, blocking us. It's life in America, that's cool.
Thank you, Paul. That's absolutely brilliant. So yeah, it's 200 sets though. Crikey. Wait a bit of heat like those ones at the back. Yeah, so the interesting thing about Teletext was it was always designed as sort of like a one-way means of communication. It would give the signals, give subtitling for the deaf, obviously, very nobly, give information here and there because there's a bit of spare capacity in the VBI lines and everything. But by the time it gets on its feet, it actually becomes quite a different beast. It's a one-way medium that's become quite sort of synchronous in a way, hasn't it? And I know that you launched some foretell galleries, which became immensely popular.
Yeah, we had we all understood that Teletext was a one-way medium. We were distributing information to the public, but we had the idea that it would be fun to ask the viewers of Foretell to design their own teletext graphics, send them into us, we would recreate them and broadcast them with their name on it. Great way to get your name on television. Hundreds of people, pictures, their ideas, graphic could look like, so to do because earlier on, how it would work. And it was a fantastic, I'm very proud of that. I think that was one of my better ideas.
Just to add to that, I always used to say that interactive service had the illusion of being interactive. People would put in a number and they would think that they were actually pulling that page out of the air. It was their page. But it also, when it came to competitions, we had some amazing competitions at Teletext, and we actually took 2 guys on to source amazing prizes as well, like red carpet premieres in Hollywood, etc. And we had tiny numbers of applications to those sort of things, tiny, maybe 100 people, because they didn't think they could win. And yet if it was 3 tins of cat food, 20,000 entries, 20,000. Because there was the perception that they could win this, it was a low value item, it was a really big value item. Oh, everyone's going to go for that, because we had 12 to 15 million viewers a day, so they're going to think millions of people have applied for it, but they didn't. So when we ended, it was a bit like the people who won those things were often the most deserving people to have won something because they were confident, they were implying, they were entering just about every competition that was going. So, but to them, as I say to the audience, this was a massively interactive service, and things like Bamboozle again. They thought that was their own pathway through the quiz. They had no idea that this was pre-programmed and there's a limited number of options for each page.
Yeah, and but a lot of people here knew how to defeat the Bamboozle, and especially when you got to like your memorise pages, you could mark your own homework a little bit as well. That's quite thankful. But I was the one, I didn't have a fast set, so seeing the hexadecimal flip past, what on earth is that with that? So that's frustrating. But staying with interaction, that gave you again more innovation, and you had a dating service on the Teletext, and you have bingo on your service as well.
Yeah, bingo on CFAX.
Bingo on CFAX, and also wrote the first ever electronic blog in the world, about being an expectant father, the pregnant father. So yeah, and he's still got printouts of them as well, which I've seen, which is, it goes to show that, you know, although things have been invented like CFAX and Teletext did it first. Do you have any stories about the dating service that you're allowed to say before 9 o'clock in the evening?
One or two, then the rest got to be after 9. I just think one of them can actually creep in before then. So yeah, bear with me. So yeah, we had a dating service. It was run by the editorial department, as many of the audio texts as what we called, what used to be called 0898 number services, advertised at the bottom of the screen. They were run by the editorial department because we couldn't trust our colleagues in sales not to put stuff up there which would just deliberately get people to phone in and make money. So there was an editorial element to every single one of these, be it a weather forecast or all the other things we did, cricket scores, etc. So you got something on the TV. Deputy, steeped in journalism and run PA law courts, very, very senior guy. One of his daily duties was to go through the institute. So we said, without advertising, took advice on this in terms of how to advertise. We looked at cards in phone box over London and that sort of stuff. And we came up, as long as they were specific about the type of person they were looking for, it got through. But then we have another problem, and this is where it gets tricky. There were some people, due to their sexual needs, desires, would be very, very specific about what they were looking for. One of them we did allow on there was someone looking for a female, certain age range with one leg. And that is all I can say.
You can't possibly leave it there.
There were, again, this was the time, it was a lot more sort of innocent in many ways, but we gave lots of advice about when you're meeting someone for the first time, make it a public, all the things that you know we read about now, but at the time it wasn't, no one really talked about that, but it was very, very serious. People genuinely did use it for dating. And they started to get married, and those married couples started having children. I was invited to 5 different weddings, I didn't go to any of them. I got photos of the children as they came. The Sun newspaper would constantly refer to this as a couple hitched. It became really, really big, you know. There's another one of those social sides of Teletext I found absolutely.
And now that we found ways of doing it, were there any instances where you had to, you know, try and use any form of archive at all to try and, you know, for any reasons, you know, to perhaps, you know, give someone an alibi or something like that?
Not towards the end, but actually, ironically, at the beginning of CFAX, all the pages that were transmitted were kept on punched tape. And we had boxes and boxes of yellow punched tape. And I think part of the idea was that if there were any queries about stuff that we put on air, you could refer back to the page and prove that you hadn't said what they were claiming you said. I don't think that lasted very long, because shortly after that, we stopped using punched tape when the core store went out of action. But it was quite strange that as I say, we had boxes and boxes of yellow punched tape sitting around all over the CFAX office.
Yeah, and this is why I find what the guys, the Teletext archaeologists, etc., are doing is just amazing, because yeah, we were told this was impossible. I think it's 2 per VHS. We were told you could just about get it, but it was too unstable. You couldn't actually get a full page.
Betamax, I think.
We had to record everything, every broadcast page, and keep it for 6 months for regulatory reasons. But getting the data out of those recordings was difficult. It didn't look like Teletext. It was some, I never actually saw it, but it was something very different. But we had lots of requests for these pages within that archive from the police, because yeah, people would use it as an alibi. They would say, well, we would get a call. We had a call once from a police force in Northern Ireland, then we got someone accused of something. They're saying they saw a page on Teletext. They can say them.
Yeah, it's quite fascinating, really, that people are sort of like that. You know, it was a part of an everyday life thing to check Teletext. So yeah, it would be quite it'd be a good alibi and a believable one as well. So yeah, it's as we move on into the future, we can see where Teletext has left a legacy with people. A lot of journalists still have to write to the rules of Teletext, although they don't know Teletext allow AI to flourish.
So, certainly not in the way that Teletext was crafted and regulated for your accuracy, reliability, timeliness in the 80s and 90s, and the noughties where it still existed, but certainly that peak period in the 90s, it had to be absolutely accurate, and that is one thing that we know that generative AI, full disclosure, I run now a Substack blog on all of this, the impact of generative AI on human-made media, so all the impacts on journalism that AI is having is in my area, that's become my thing. There are journalists around the country that are using this as a tool. They're using it to summarise, they're using it to fill in the gaps. Some more, who do we trust? Who are the news brands that children growing up now, having grown up 20, 30 years ago with a guaranteed, trustworthy news service in front of them and other information services, don't really name news sources. They don't know that the BBC is even a news source. They just refer to, I saw it on my phone. TikTok talking about this, therefore it must be true. Look to see what the impact of that is long term. Just look at America. Just look at the fact that Donald Trump is now positing to have trusted, accurate news, which is the legacy, which is what we created, back in those days, and we've lost it. So it's one of the many things that we've lost with the demise in our own country of regulated, quality, trustworthy services, the teletext medium. Is kids growing up today, they are all at sea. They have no idea who to trust, what the news sources are, what the provenance of information is at all, and AI is just going to make that even worse.
Yeah, I think we won't find anyone really disagreeing with you with the main thrust of your point there. And you, do you feel the same?
I couldn't have put that any better. I would endorse everything that Graham just said.
Yeah, it does. It seems to be. Perhaps it seems to be the other side of democratising the platform, because now that everybody, the likes of us, can get our hands on something that looks as genuine as Teletext, we can put anything on there. Someone might even make a pastiche of Teletext holidays and CFAX and call it CFAX holidays, and you'd never imagine what would happen then. That might go up to the top of an image search, and then every time someone runs a story about CFAX, there might be a picture of CFAX holidays up there. I mean, that'd be a terrible world to live in. Who would do such a thing? I don't know if anyone's watching on the feed right now, but
no names, no backdrop.
Yeah, no names, Dan. But yeah, so it is strange how that people now are calling up images from CFAX, and they're picking up things that I've made, other people have made in the community, and they're going, well, it's got to be right. It's Teletext, so CFAX on it. So I guess that's that's the other side of it. It's very, very, very interesting thing to say. So 50 years then, the first 50 years of Teletext. It's a bit of a silly question to say, have you enjoyed it? Because you obviously have. But what really, what is the most remarkable things that you remember about Teletext?
I think it's the public reaction to it. From starting off with, when I joined CFAX, there were 4 Teletext-equipped televisions in the United Kingdom. One was in James Redman's office, Jimmy Redman, the Director of Engineering. One was in the Director General's office. One was in reception at Television Centre, and the other one was in Colin McIntyre's front room as editor. And there is a little story that goes along with that, which is because he was working all the hours that God sent, his wife got very fed up with him not coming home in time for dinner. So he got into the habit of using one of the back pages on CFAX to say, I'm just leaving Television Centre, home in 40 minutes, put it on. Which I thought was very original of him. And lots of people have asked me over the years whether that's a true story, and I can attest it certainly is true. I thought it was a very clever way of making Teletext interactive when there were only 4 sets. Sorry.
That's brilliant, that is brilliant. And that is the holy grail. We don't think we'll ever get it, will we? Because if there's only 4 sets, you need like someone recording.
Well, you just much if anybody's recording. It doesn't have to be on
True,
4 sets.
Yeah, I guess it's it. Well, same question to you then, Graham. I mean, you know, you've done many things, accomplished many things. We know that, you know, about the sadness of, you know, overview experienced with the services of, you know, getting to know so many people and it having to end. But, you know, concentrating on a positive, you know, what positive, what are the most positive memories of working in Teletext for you?
Again, I do dwell on that social side, that human side, because again, it's what I write about. I'm writing about human first AI. I'm writing about authentic information which AI cannot write because it doesn't feel, doesn't sense, doesn't emote, hasn't lived a human life. So that's what I remember more about the impact of Teletext. So Connor was a journalist here before from BBC Look East. He was clearly under 30. He said 3 things to me. I remember CFAX, remember watching it with my granddad, he remembered a certain page number. And that's what, he was a baby at the time, but he remembers, he brings a family member into the story, he brings a certain page number, and he brings an experience, something that connected him with a family member and a trusted information service. And that is what everyone always says. They always bring that human connection in. It's never I sat there alone for 4 hours watching some boring pages of text going around, coming in on page 37 to 53. They never say that. We thought they were. We thought that was their biggest complaint. It wasn't. But it was this social side. They got something out of it. They made a connection and it made their lives better. I'm really proud of what we achieved. Mortai are free for the next one of these in 50 years' time. We've checked diaries. We will be here. Many of you won't. I sound like William Hague now, don't I? But yeah, it's an amazing thing, and it's just amazing as well. And I just want to say thank you, Carl, for the podcasts and for helping bring all this together and for helping me and Mort. You know, we haven't seen each other for 30 years. I haven't seen Paul Rose for 30 years. This is just an amazing experience. I didn't know Rusty was a real person. I thought it was just an avatar. AI. Yeah, thank you.
No, thank you very much. But that in turn, I'd like to pass that on to the guys in the back of the room. I mean, you know, we've got Nathan at the back there, we've got Alistair, who's managed to avoid coming up here. But it was his ZXNet editor that was the main focus of the recovery efforts and things like that. And before him, there was a chap called Simon Rules as well, who did Teletext50. And there was Alistair, was it Alistair Buxton, who was like the main linchpin of this. So it's a proper community effort, you know, and I think that's how Teletext would have liked it have done as well, as we were sown the seed.
I'd just like to endorse that, and I'd also like to thank everybody who played a role in putting this together, because I have enjoyed it immensely. It's a huge nostalgia trip for me, taking me back to one of the most enjoyable parts of my working life. I love Teletext, I love its immediacy, I love all the things that we did with a medium that was brand new. We made the rules up, I'm just really sorry that it didn't get a longer run. But anyway, thanks guys, it's been great.
Oh, that's brilliant. Well, before we do finally wrap up, does anybody have any questions or anything that the panellists would like to answer? We've got one on gold there, I think that's Mr. Pixel Blip. I'll pass you over.
So with all the developments with AI, when we reach singularity, or AGI as they call it, is it going to be able to make half-decent teletext image?
Depends what it's trained on. So if you're training a model purely on recovered teletext pages and there's no glitches, love your t-shirt, then yes, it will. It will, you know, like a Mid-Journey or Sora or VO, it will faithfully bring back to you something that it's trained on, but it'll only ever be a subset of what you put in, and it won't write the story correctly, and there'll be hallucinations, there'll be bias, there'll be factual errors. You'll have to check it.
Do you want to bet on that?
Well, you said two things. You said AGI and singularity, so they are slightly different. So AGI obviously is AI as smart as a human being. Singularity is way, way smarter, and it probably will go rogue at that stage. But again, is that within 50 years' time, or will we be celebrating this 100th anniversary of Teletext alongside the demise of human race? I don't know. It's tricky.
Well, marvellous question. Someone, yes, and your name, sir? Oh, Robert, here you go.
It's more about what I would like to say to everybody here is thank you. My particular interest in astronautics and space, and the historic launch of Columbia on 1981, which I watched and recorded, and there was amazing sea facts, you know, and there was live commentary. There was a page on sea facts that you could go to, and I loved it for space purposes, and that was, and Teletext got me actually involved in Helen Shanlon's Juno mission, because there was an appeal for experimenters, and so not only did Teletext help keep me up to date with what was going on in the space program throughout the world, I got to play a small part as one of the experimenter groups. So thank you very much.
That's a brilliant story, and I wholly agree with that. One thing I would say is that you've just reminded me that obviously when CFAX first started, it was just a group of journalists in one room ripping stuff off from the PA and Reuters and GNS. But as it grew, it became accepted that CFAX would send a journalist to cover a major event. And the one that I'm thinking of particularly is the Moscow Olympics, where Audrey Adams of CFAX was sent over to send back live information, live results to the CFAX computer. And that was really groundbreaking at the time. It was extraordinary. And I don't know whether Teletext ever did something similar.
We did through PA, but my time at CFAX as well, so when CFAX was taken over by the news division, quite a big budget for external contributed content and freelancers as well. So one of the freelancers was a guy called Paul Wood, went on to be a very famous BBC war reporter, now lives in the Middle East. But he volunteered, he had BBC training, safety training, but he went out to former Yugoslavia and reported that live for CFAX. Incredible guy, and then came back and was just a sub-editor for a while, and then he went off to huge things on BBC TV as a journalist. But yeah, there was, it's worth to say, a lot of very famous journalists started off at CFAX and indeed at Teletext as well. Lots of people went on to great things, and at CFAX as well, it was a training ground for a lot of journalists as well. They would come to the CFAX newsroom to learn, again, the accuracy, the brevity, getting a story across in as few words as possible. Brilliant training.
Can you explain ripping off in the context? It meant ripping off the sheets.
Yes, sorry, I should have made that clear. That's my wife correcting me. When I say ripping off Reuters, I don't mean stealing their material. There were teleprinter machines at the back of the newsroom constantly churning out news information and sports results and financial information. And the BBC GNS service actually operated something called a rip and read, which was the hourly bulletin. And by ripping off, I mean we used to walk back to the teleprinter, rip off the copy, come back and then repackage it for Teletext.
Someone asked before, how did CFAX get the stories to air before any other news agencies? And it was that, I've forgotten the name of the service, General News Service. So there was a part of the BBC called Traffic. So when Jeremy Bowen, say, was reporting live from Israel, he would send across a message saying what his package was about. He would say, I've got an interview with X, the person says this, it's coming in 10 minutes. That meant that we had a 10-minute lead because we were furiously writing that down before it became a actual news wire. So we knew that there was this report that BBC was going to be exclusively running in 10 minutes' time. So we were 10 minutes ahead of the main newsroom. hence the rivalry between CFAX and the main BBC newsroom.
Well, they loved us.
There's one story actually that Ian Westbrook had about that as well, where there's the internal rivalry between the broadcast side and CFAX at the time, or CFAX Sport. CFAX showed the results of the snooker before the snooker had finished on Grandstand, and Grandstand rang CFAX up and said, "Can you take the results off?" And that was like, "No, we're not going to do that." And that's where sort of like a lot, not animosity, but I think in a way it was showing that not everything was live. And in those days, you didn't have like a 24-hour rolling news service. You had 150, and that basically was the breaking news at the bottom. I mean, that's how I found out about the Gulf War, Desert Storm. That came on the ITN one first, actually, and that came on like sort of Sunday morning, and there, until GMTV or TVAM at the time was going to start running, that's the only news you had, because everything else was just like everybody was at home in bed.
So just a quick one on that as well, and that was the death of Diana. We had that story on Teletext over an hour before anyone else. That was the first time that the Press Association, whose reporter on the ground with the former Foreign Secretary Robin Cook, saw someone going over to Robin Cook, and Robin Cook's face fell. And the correspondent called Charlie Miller, the defence correspondent who was travelling with Robin Cook, got the confirmation from two people near to him that she had died. So up to that point it was Dodie dead, Diana injured. And PA put that to screen that she had died. And the world learned through teletext that she had died that morning.
That's incredible. It's absolutely incredible, and that's obviously, we were just discussing like between the break, that was a totem in everybody's story, in everybody we spoke to. Everybody had that as a landmark in their career, news-wise or event-wise.
Could I just add to that I remember that day very vividly, because I'm sure it was the same for all of the national broadcasters in the UK. I got a phone call at home at about 5 o'clock in the morning to say that she died in this car crash. And I ended up going back into Foretel, because we had to literally throw away all of the subtitles we created for all of the programmes that were scheduled to go out that night, because they changed the schedule completely. And I'm sure that was the same for the BBC and for ITV. It was a major landmark event, but it took a huge amount of work to try to keep up with the changing schedule. So I remember that very vividly.
We took all advertising off the ITV service as well, which is enormously never done before. So there were no fractionals or banners linking to advertising pages, and advertising pages were largely hidden for that whole week. All pages changed colour. It was white text, white text or white background with black text in the middle. It was a huge, huge thing for us. And we opened again using that interactive text service. We had a book of condolence for that as well through the audio text service. That was enormous, all free phone. Yeah, it's groundbreaking. The whole thing was. We won an award for that.
Oh, it's so that's been absolutely brilliant to talk about today. One thing I just wanted to ask very quickly was Jason and somebody else managed to archive some different signals coming from the teletext system. We call them secret teletext, but actually when they were decoded, was it audio description? Yeah, Auditel. So it's just it was an early precursor to audio description that we got now. I think it was the Radio 4 lady used to voice it. I think from the bit that I heard that we included in the podcast. But I just wanted to ask quickly, just for my own greed and curiosity, was a system called Auditel or anything like that ever experimented with on teletext?
No, we knew that was happening, and they used the data broadcasting line lines for that, the commercial additional teletext lines for those experiments and those services. I do remember at CFAX that there were some early experiments using VBI to do that as well, and to send other things again, some of the early level 2.5, maybe that would be CFAX, it was CFAX days. Again, that required extra capacity, so for extra pages, so if you can find any of those, that would be interesting as well. We have lots of hidden pages in Teletext, and I used to use hidden pages to wish family members happy birthday, all that sort of stuff. So absolutely, Colin started. Yeah, it was brilliant. I mean, the power is amazing, but anyone can see those pages. That's the trouble. So you have to be really careful with it. So you can say whatever you might want to say. You have to be careful as well.
Yeah, I just thought I'd show you this old inserter from the late 80s. It has an audio interface tacked onto it, so it's clearly a prototype. I don't know what it was used for, but it was clearly for sending sound over teletext. It may have been a talkback thing, or it may be an audio description, I'm not sure, but that I just happened to pick that up.
And those additional lines, the company was called Data Broadcasting Services, and I'm sure they had a lot of financial clients, they had lots of other things going on, and they probably were experimenting with voice audio services as well. But that's what you'll be, I'm sure.
Okay, well, are there any more questions from the audience at all? Yes, okay, Wayne.
Yeah. Just more really directed towards Lord Smith. What was the story behind Blue Peter and Peter Purvis stubbing his toe?
When CFAX was early in its life, the BBC grudgingly at first started to publicise it. They made a couple of films, CFAX is here and this is CFAX. And they decided it would be great to get the kids involved. So they said to Blue Peter, do you want to do a piece on CFAX? Telling people what a wonderful medium it is. And I went down onto the floor of Studio 2 at Television Centre to watch them recording Blue Peter. And it came to the CFAX bit. They had a CFAX set at the back of the set. And Peter Purvis was supposed to be going up and saying, this is CFAX, this is how it works, you can get the latest news, sport, weather, whatever, from it. And they did a dry run. And he walked across the studio and tripped over the wire-wrapped prototype decoder that was feeding the teletext set. And he said, bugger me, what's that? Who left that there? What is it? And somebody said, that's a teletext decoder. And he said, oh, every home's going to want one of those, aren't they? I don't think he was terribly fond of CFAX.
Yeah, they were quite good. The Angela Rippon film was always quite good. That's always on there. This is CFAX, and that's actually quite a good historical document to have on there. It sort of shows the optimism of that as well. So it's quite fascinating, really. Do we have anybody else for any questions at all? Okay, right. Well, if you do want to sort of grab one of these guys and buy them a can of Fanta or something like that, I'm sure they'll really take you up on the offer. It's been absolutely brilliant to have you both today.
You were promised a sofa. Where's the sofa?
Yeah, I know. It was an inflatable sofa. I just didn't have a.
Trade description.
I know. Yeah, if you're selling a holiday and it says it's £5 and it comes with a beach towel. Yeah, no, the reality was that if it went down, it would have been funny watching you two get up. So that would be good. But honestly, I'd like to thank both of you, Graham Lovelace and Ian Morton-Smith. Thank you so much for joining on the Sofa Club today, and they deserve, obviously, a big round of applause. Thank you very much. Happening next, but you stretch your legs and there'll be another event along there like buses. So brilliant, thank you, and thanks very much for participating as well and having a good listen. Thank you very much. Give yourselves a round of applause.
I might have at least developed some sort of
channels and then all the analog channels are coming here. Yes, it's all been done here.
How did you get started with this?
I feel like that's very cheap. I started, I got a Raspberry Pi, and I discovered online
I grew up using
all this after Teletext had disappeared. It's amazing.
There's at least
name selling crap, what's going on?
What's great, I thought you're in level 2. It's not conservatory years I tried it on actual live exam.
I had a test day